I'm not going to call the meeting to order. I'm just going to start by reading the statement from VLCT about doing an entirely online meeting, and I'll give the call-in info and all that good stuff, and then you can call the meeting to order.
Okay.
All right. I mean, unless you want to read all that out loud. I didn't think you.
No, thank you. And then what I think I'll do, because there are 5 people, in terms of the election of the chair, I will ask for somebody to voice identify themselves, and then I'll call upon them to make a motion. Just in case.
Hold on, sorry.
What's that?
Unknown participant is now joining.
I had Channel 17 feed open in a separate tab and it started going. So, sorry about that. Annie.
I just heard an unknown participant is now joining. Are we okay with, is that how that's going to work when public comes in that we don't know who it is?
I'm sorry, could you repeat? Could you repeat that, Annie?
I heard an unknown participant has entered the meeting. Are we okay with unknown participants, or must each person be known to us? Oh, thank you, Raj. Okay.
Yeah.
I'm just remembering all the things I saw online, and so I.
Yep. Okay. All right. So I have 7 o'clock. Are all of the board members on board? I see Andy, Annie, Pat. Vince, are you still there?
I am still here.
Got it. Okay. So I'm going to read a statement about our online meeting so that everyone has all the information they need. So bear with me while I take care of this housekeeping business. So due to the state of emergency declared by Governor Scott as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic and pursuant to Addendum 6 to Executive Order 0120 and Act 92, this public body is authorized to meet electronically. In accordance with Act 92, there is no physical location for the public to observe and participate in this meeting. However, in accordance with the temporary amendments to the open meeting law, I can confirm that we are doing several things. We are providing public access to the meeting.
Lisa LaBerge
is now joining.
We are providing public access to the meeting by telephone and video, with additional access offered through Channel 17's YouTube link. We are using Microsoft Teams for this remote meeting. All members of the board have the ability to communicate during this meeting through this platform, and the public has access to listen and, if desired, to participate in this meeting by joining the meeting at the web address provided on the agenda. You can call in at 802-377-3784.
Is now joining.
Using conference ID number 996-290-9799 and pressing pound. We will pause after each business item to give the public an opportunity to connect. We will wait about a minute in silence so that the board, so that the public can call in if they wish to communicate at that time. If you have trouble communicating or getting through on the phone when you are trying to talk, please text me, Elaine Haney, at 802-324-2546. So if you cannot get through by phone and you're having trouble doing that, please text me so that I can stop the proceedings so that you can get through, or you can text me your question at 802-324-2546. We are providing public notice of the instructions for accessing the meeting. We previously gave notice to the public of the necessary information for accessing the meeting, including how to access the meeting using telephone or video, in our posted meeting agenda, which is also posted on the town website, essexvt.org. We're providing a mechanism for the public to alert the public body during the meeting if there are problems with access. Again, if anyone has a problem, they can text me at 802-324-2546. We will continue the meeting if necessary. In the event the public is unable to access this meeting, it will be continued at a time and place certain. Please note that all votes taken during this meeting are not unanimous and will that are not unanimous will be done by roll call vote in accordance with the law. So why don't we quickly do a roll call of the board members and staff who are present at the meeting, and then I will hand it over to Evan. So I'm Elaine Haney, Chair of the Select Board.
Andy Watts, I'm here.
Patrick Murray, I am here.
Annie Cooper, I'm here.
Vince Franco here.
And staff?
Evan Teach.
Greg Duggan, Deputy Manager.
Sarah Macy, Finance Director.
Okay, it sounds like we have everybody.
Karen Lemna, Assessor.
Hello, Karen.
Hello.
Any other staff?
Sounds like it for now.
Okay, Evan, it's all yours.
Okay, thank you. So this is the organizational meeting of the town select board. This is going to be odd because it is being done electronically. First, I'm going to ask that all the select board members turn your video cameras on and staff turn yours off so that I can see as many elected members as possible. The first order of business is to nominate a chair for this coming year. Normally what would happen if we were all in the same room, I would ask for a motion, somebody would raise their hand, they'd be recognized, and I would ask them for a motion. That's going to be awfully hard in this venue, but let's try this out. By voice, who would like to make a motion on chair?
Patrick Murray, I would like to nominate Elaine Haney for chair.
Before I ask for a second, is there anyone else that wants to make a nomination? Going once. Going twice. Does someone want to make a second to the nomination of Elaine Haney for chair?
I will second Annie Cooper.
I have a second. Okay. So Patrick Murray nominates Elaine Haney. Annie Cooper seconds. Any discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Any nays? 1, 2, 3. It is unanimous. Ms. Haney, you are the select board chair, and the meeting is yours.
Thank you, Evan. Thank you, everyone. I truly appreciate your confidence in me to do this again for another year. Thank you. Next order of business will be to elect a vice chair. Would anyone like to make a nomination?
I would like to nominate Patrick Murray for vice chair.
Are there any other nominations? All right, I will second the motion to nominate Pat Murray as vice chair. If there's any further discussion, all those in favor of having Pat Murray as vice chair of the select board, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, we have a new vice chair. Pat, congratulations. Thank you for stepping up.
Thank you.
Okay. The last office to elect is for clerk. Generally, as a tradition, the newest member of the select board is chosen to be the clerk. We don't have to stick with that tradition, but that generally is how we do it. So I would like to nominate Vince Franco to be select board clerk. Are there any other nominations for clerk? Hearing none, is there a second?
I will second.
Annie seconds. Any further discussion?
Just to this is Evan, just to let Vince know, we don't let him flounder. We do help him through the position.
Also, it's not a hugely responsible position. It's mostly at the table. So,
Should we ask him if he's okay with it?
where are you, Vince?
I am all set with that.
Okay. All those in favor of appointing Vince Franco as clerk of the select board, please say aye.
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 Aye. Aye.
Opposed? All right. And Vince is now the secretary or clerk. And Vince, welcome aboard. This is your first meeting of the select board. It's an unusual circumstance, but we're very happy to have you.
I'm happy to be here.
Someday we'll be able to shake your hand.
Someday.
You do the elbow thing.
Oh,
Right, everybody do an elbow.
It's like a chicken dance at the most recent wedding I was at.
Okay, so moving on in the agenda. This is the next item is agenda additions and changes. This is the time when we make any additions or changes to the agenda. Evan or Greg, do you have anything?
Greg?
Sorry, I'm trying to fix the link at the same time, so I'm mildly distracted. We haven't updated one of the reading file items. The email from Susan McNamara Hill about liquor licenses was not in full in your packet, so we have a full email that reference that's been added.
The next item is agenda additions and changes. If you're not speaking, could you please mute your microphone? Thank you. Any other changes, Evan?
No.
Okay.
I've got something I'd like to bring up. The check warrants, since we're not physically present to sign them, I'd like to have a discussion about how we deal with those. Can we pull that out to be a business item for a short discussion around that? I agree. We should pull that out of the consent agenda and make that business item. Let's see, you want to just make it 6A and do it first, or do you want to do it after 6E? What is your preference? Okay, let's put it on after 6E. So we're going to move the check warrants out of the consent agenda, and we're going to put them in the business items, new business item 6F. Annie, is your hand up? Oh, okay. Okay, and just as Andy modeled for us, if there's anything else in the consent agenda that people want to take out and discuss, now would be the time to ask about that. If there's corrections to the minutes that you'd like to make or anything else, there's only 2 items in the consent agenda. So if there aren't any other consent agenda items that you want to pull out, we'll vote on amending the agenda. Okay. If everyone is okay with those agenda additions, can I get a motion to approve the revised agenda? I move approval of the revised agenda.
Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Okay, I heard 2 seconds there. That's awesome. All those in favor of the agenda as amended, please say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. Okay, now we are going, a favor to ask of all board members before we continue. Please remember to keep your video on, and if you want to speak, please wave or say something, because I will be recognizing you based on if you're waving, because I can't always tell if you're not. We're not in a room together, so I can't tell if you need to speak. So do keep your video on and wave at me if you need to speak and I'm not acknowledging you. Thank you. Okay, public to be heard. This is the period of time when the public can ask questions of the board on items that are not on the agenda. And because we have about a 30-second delay with Channel 17's live feed, we're going to sit quietly and wait to see if there are any people in the audience who wish to ask a question. If I can ask board members and everyone listening to mute your mics so that we can hear if someone's trying to get in, I'd appreciate it. Okay, I did get one text from an audience member, and I haven't heard anyone else call in, so I'm just going to ask the question from the audience member. This is a question for staff. The March 5th Governance Subcommittee meeting minutes. Audience is wondering when and who will be approving those minutes.
This is Greg speaking. Two things. Can we get who is asking the question for the record?
Of course.
And for an answer, it's a good question. We hadn't thought about it. My first thought is we can take it to an upcoming select board and trustee meeting for approval.
Okay. For the record, that question came from Irene Renner. And hearing no other questions, I've gotten no other texts. We're going to move on with the agenda. Thank you for everyone for accommodating the long, awkward silence, but I think that's the best way for us to make sure the public is heard. Business item 6A, approval of rules and regulations for orderly conduct of business. Take it away, Greg.
Okay, so this is something the select board does at their first meeting in April each year after choosing a chair and vice chair and clerk, is to accept or approve the rules and regulations for orderly conduct of business. They also do it for the conflict of interest policy, and we have the communications policy in front of you tonight as well. So first off is the rules and regulations for orderly conduct of business. In short, it's just the rules to keep the select board operating at its meetings, kind of give some structure and some guidelines as to who runs the meetings, how they take place, how they're warned, those types of things. No changes this year. The last updates were in 2018, 2 years ago. So basically they're for before you tonight for review and any discussion before hopefully the board approves them.
Thank you, Greg. Board members, particularly Vince, as our newest board member, do you have any questions or comments or discussion about the rules and regulations for orderly conduct of business?
Nope, I was able to get access to them today and read them, so
awesome.
I'm all good.
Okay.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Andy, thank you for reading.
Yep. I always like to highlight. I don't want to. I don't intend to make any recommended changes, but I always like to highlight things that I think are important in the policy. One you've already covered is the raising your hand to get the chair's attention to speak. I know that sometimes is difficult during joint meetings, as the trustees have a different standard there. But I think it's important to. I think we do follow that pretty well as a select board member. Another thing is side conversations are not allowed at the table or in the audience. I find them personally very distracting if the person next to me tries to make a side comment. So I just want to remind folks to avoid that. The top of page 4 under motions and votes, section 2 mentions that it says, although that motions are not always necessary on each item, and if a select board wishes to create policy, give direction, enact, enable, or adopt a proposal or an ordinance or anything within its authority, it shall be by motion and seconded and a recorded vote. So this is also mentioned in our communications policy, where a position is not taken unless there's an actual vote on that position. And so those are the comments I wanted to make on our policy. Thank you.
Thanks, Andy. Anybody else questions or comments about the orderly conduct of business policy? So Greg, you're looking for a vote of approval on this from us?
That is correct.
Okay. Would anyone like to move? Andy.
I move approval of the rules and regulations for orderly conduct of business.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Okay. So let's give it a minute after this business item for the public to ask questions if they have any. Okay. Oh, Andy, sorry.
Yeah, I'm muted, so.
We haven't heard anything from the public, so we're going to continue with the next business item, which is 6B, approval of conflict of interest policy. Once again, Greg, would you walk us through?
Sure. So similar to the rules and regs for orderly conduct of business, this is something the select board approves each year. Basically, it defines conflict of interest, lays out what is considered conflict of interest and what should be avoided when a board member can look to recuse him or herself, and some other guidelines about what happens with a perceived conflict of interest. Similarly, this one was last updated in 2018. Happy to answer any questions about it, but it's before you again for review and any discussion before hopefully approval.
Okay. Anybody have any questions or comments about the conflict of interest policy? Andy?
Again, I'm not going to propose any changes, but I do want to comment that I'm also bound by a code of conduct that I signed with my employer that sometimes requires me to recuse myself in situations where the topic being discussed by the select board may cause either a real or perceived conflict of interest with my employer. So just want to remind folks that I have that constraint. Also, my wife is a Essex Free Library trustee, and I bring that up whenever we have discussions about the library, and I will continue to do so just so that it's unambiguous and clearly stated. With regard to the policy, there is one section that I object to, the Article 11, which is titled Enforcement. I don't believe we should ever publicly admonish any of our volunteers, which is what's referenced in that section. So, although I don't want to get into a discussion about it tonight and ask for its removal, I just want to express my unhappiness with it being in there.
Understandable. Thanks, Andy. Anybody else have questions or comments about the policy?
Yeah.
Annie.
To Andy's point, I too don't love the concept of the public thing, but also, am I correct that this has never been in this policy before? This is new?
No, this is
No, it's not new. It's not
the
new.
last
This has
time.
always been there?
Yeah, and I think the last time we revised it was 2018, and that was not something that we touched.
I don't love the concept of the public thing, but also I understand how if you get to a point where something is truly problematic, there's not much recourse. And so I do understand why it might be necessary to have a deeper conversation publicly so that it is a shared conversation with the community. But I also, I do have the same feeling as Andy, but Andy, my understanding is that there comes a moment where the public has to be in on that conversation too. And I think that reasonably that would not go there unless something was truly problematic. Would I be correct in saying that like that, Elaine?
I think so, Annie. And I think the other reason that that's there is because there is no way to dismiss a board member because they're elected officials. Andy?
There is a comment in there that says that section does not apply to select board members. This is our appointed folks that we can remove from their appointed office without cause for any situation. And I just have concern, and maybe I should stop, but because I really didn't want to start a big conversation because I know we have other topics tonight.
Thank you, Andy. Annie?
Yeah, my bad. I was having a different conversation than I do feel like Andy first stated. My bad. My apologies. If it's about staff.
Well, I'll tell you what, if it's Andy, go ahead.
It's not about staff, it's about appointed, it's like our volunteers.
Volunteers, my bad. Sorry.
Okay. For the purposes of tonight's meeting, would you say that you're interested in revisiting this at a future meeting to have a longer discussion?
I'd like that, yeah.
Okay.
I agree that point, I would like to hammer out that point a little bit more, but yes, not tonight. And obviously
No, understandable. So, Greg and Evan, can we ask you to put that on a future agenda?
We can do that.
To discuss that section of the policy at a future meeting. But in the meantime, let's go ahead and approve the policy as it stands for now so that we can move on with the agenda. Can I get a motion to approve the conflict of interest policy?
Elaine, can I jump in? This is Greg with the quick point of order.
Of course.
Just thinking, usually you take public comment before you take a motion and a vote. So just wondering if you want to do the 30-second wait now before you look for a motion.
Thank you, Greg. I will do that. My apologies for getting it out of order. So yeah, let's hold on for a minute while we see if anybody wants to contribute from the public. Okay, hearing none from the public, let's go ahead and finish that vote. Would anyone like to move to approve the conflict of interest policy? So moved by Andy.
I move approval of the conflict of interest policy.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Pat. All those in favor, any discussion? All those in favor of approving the conflict of interest?
Unknown participant is now exiting.
Please say aye.
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 Opposed? All right. The conflict of interest policy passes. Now, communications policy. One more for Greg.
Hello again. Communications policy provides some guidelines on how how the select board should be speaking in public, both as a board member and as individuals. Touches on open meeting law and how to communicate properly within the board, amongst the board, outside of an open meeting, when that's allowed. And basically just provide some guidance, not just to the select board, but to all volunteer boards and committees in Essex. So once again, happy to answer any more questions about details. Otherwise, up for discussion and potentially approval.
Thank you, Greg. Any questions or comments from board members? Andy?
Here we go again. So I just want to reiterate the discussion that we've had quite a bit of in the past about select board members are free to have their own position, but when they are making a statement that is their own position, need to make it clear that it is such, and that Technically, only the chair should be referred to when someone wants the official position of the select board. And also, the third paragraph in the public communications section talks about that fact that the questions should be referred to the chair for official positions. And I kind of interpret some of that to mean that if there's an email that comes that's addressed to all 5 of us, I never respond to those because I feel that I don't want to start a discussion. And I assume that this paragraph gives the chair that responsibility. And unfortunately, this may make us look like we are unresponsive, but that's the way I read this and view this. Just wanted to make that clear. If I get an email directed directly to me, there's a encouragement in the policy that when I respond, that I copy either the chair or another designated board member. I may or may not choose to do that. I do respond to individual emails that I get, but I don't always copy the chair because it gives me the alternative to keep that communication private, or as private as a public record is in the moment. The other thing I wanted to bring up is the second paragraph under responses to public comments. I'm kind of going to read it. It says, this policy is not intended to discourage any elected or appointed official from exercising that individual's First Amendment rights. However, board, committee, and commission members must always keep in mind that due to the public nature of their roles, their personal online communications can be perceived as official communications or positions of the select board in town. Therefore, members must practice discretion when communicating online. And I think that's a very important paragraph, and I've seen it happen where if somebody can say something and then we see later that the select board says this, when in fact it wasn't necessarily a select board position. So I just want to reiterate that that statements made can be interpreted as positions unless they're very clearly stated as not. And I know we don't yet have a social media policy. I'm not suggesting that we talk about that tonight, but maybe sometime in the future we should. I've brought that up before too. So.
Thanks, Andy. I think you're correct about your interpretation of when somebody emails the 5 board members that it's the chair's role to respond to that email. I don't know that people know that really, so we don't want them to think that we're ignoring them except for one board member. I recall when I was a trustee, we changed the website to explain to people that if you email all 5 trustees at one time, you're only going to get one email back from one of them, because otherwise that would be violating open meeting law. Perhaps we can copy that language from the village website and put it on the town website so people are aware that that's a procedure that we have to follow to maintain open meeting law. So. And at some point, we do need to talk about a social media policy. I know every time it comes up, we kick the can down the road, and we're going to do it again tonight. But it is something that we need to work on. I know VLCT has created a model social media policy, which we can explore and see if that might apply, or we can adapt it to our needs. So we can do that at a future time. So unless anybody else has questions or comments about the communications policy, I'll open it up to the public. Okay, I'm going to ask us all to pause for a minute while we see if the public has something to say.
Elaine, I don't know if you see that Ken Signorello is asking a question in the chat.
Elaine, you have to unmute yourself.
Thank you. I just saw that pop up. It hadn't come up on my computer yet. So just to test, is this an easier way to make a comment? It is an easier way to make a comment. As you can see, however, it's a challenge as to whether we actually notice it. So we will do our very best, everyone, to look at the chat and at texts and emails and phone calls to make sure that we're addressing everybody's questions. So thank you for asking that question. Other than that, there were no other comments coming in from the public that I know of. So let's move on to a vote. Would anyone like to make a motion to approve the communications policy? Andy?
I move approval of the Select Board communications policy.
Is there a second?
Second.
I'll second that motion.
Vince's first motion. Any further discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Opposed? Okay, thank you very much. Moving on to item D, reaffirm commitment to the Farm and Open Land Program. Greg, would you talk to us about that?
Or, Greg, this is Sarah. Do you want me
Actually,
to?
if Karen's still here, Karen's still here. I'll let her take this one.
Oh, excellent. Thank you, Karen.
Karen and Sarah.
Lisa LaBerge.
Is now exiting.
Madam Chair, so we have Sarah and Karen covering this one.
Thank you both. I'm looking forward to hearing it.
Who wants to start?
This is Sarah. I can just jump in, and then Karen, you can tack on whatever I've missed. So,
Okay.
over the last, gosh, I guess it was early in March now that this came up. The town has a number of farm and open lands contracts that stem from a 1993 vote of the townwide voters, which authorized the select board to enter into these agreements per statute. 10 of the original agreements are still active today. They've each been for a period of 5 years, and they've been extended upon expiration for another 5 years up until now in 2020. We have a couple coming up for renewal now, and the folks had contacted Karen, which had sort of sparked an internal research and what is this conversation, whereby Karen and myself and Greg, Evan, Darren, and Owiso all got together and pulled some stuff out and got some additional information. And we'd like to ask the select board to reaffirm their support for the program before we move forward with renewing these contracts for another 5 years. Karen, I'll hand it over to you to add anything if you'd like.
All I want to say is not to correct you, Sarah, but the only reason these came up is as the assessor, I'm in charge of keeping track of when they expire. The property owners do not reach out to us at all. So I'm the one that's reaching out to them to let them know that the 5-year contract has expired.
All right, I stand corrected. Thank you.
But other than that, as you said, we have 3 that are up for renewal, and these have, prior to my coming on board, have just been renewed every time they expire. So again, that is why this is being brought up, to make sure that this is a program that we're going to continue with. And as you said, the staff recommends the town select board to reaffirm their support of the Farm and Open Lands Contracts Program.
Thank you, Karen and Sarah. Board members, do you have any questions? Evan?
Before you go to the board, and I want to ask actually Greg and others a question. Remind me, this is one of our reasons we wanted to keep open space from development. And then should one of these people decide they don't want to be in the program, we get right of first refusal to purchase their property in hopes of keeping it open space. That'd be a fair assessment of the program?
Yes.
Yes, that's correct. It's one of the tools that Essex has to protect its open space, whether that's farms or forests. It's similar to the current use program at the state level. It's just kind of a local way to do that. It's something that the town plan reaffirmed a few years back when the community adopted the town plan. Speaks a lot to open space and preserving our natural environment. This is one of the ways to do that. And yes, as one of the clauses, that when a property owner enters into the farm and open lands contract with the town of Essex, the town does have the right of first refusal. So as I think Darren pointed it out in the memo, that was one of the benefits of the conservation reserve fund that was established a few years ago to actually put some money aside for various conservation reasons, but this being one of them. If one of these properties does come up, the town of Essex would have an opportunity to consider if it makes sense for the town to acquire.
Thanks, Greg. That's all I had.
Board members, do you have questions?
I do.
Is that Andy?
Yeah.
Go ahead, Andy.
So we have in the past had folks who are in this program sell their property, and then when they try to do the title search, discovered that they had this need to offer it to the town first. So that I think people who have these contracts don't always remember that they have to come to the town before they can sell their property. We ran into that once in the last 6 years that I've been on the board. And so is part of the renewal some sort of reminder that, hey, don't forget, if you want to sell your property, you need to come to the town first? Because this was an awkward situation where there was already a purchase and sale agreement in place, and then they realized that they couldn't do it. I just want.
Sure.
I don't think the renewal, this is the first year that I've had to work with this, and it's not, the renewal is just reaching out to them to let them know that we have an extension contract that they sign, and then the unified manager approves that, but it's not something to remind them and to bring forth their contracts again. Which is not a bad idea, though.
And I'm wondering if we should somehow remind them that they have this agreement, that they can't just sell their property without offering it to the town first. And the other thing that I wanted to bring up that wasn't brought up here is if somebody does leave the program, they have to pay back part of. They may have to pay back part of it depending on what time when their taxes. Because I remember that happening with this particular case. Someone was selling it and removing it from this program, and they had to pay back some of the taxes that they had previously been relieved with. It's my memory of that.
That would be correct.
Yeah.
And so I can certainly talk with Karen and Sarah as we send it out for update. We can. We could talk about what we would send in that letter, including maybe even just the highlighted section that tells them what their requirements are.
Yep, great, thank you.
Karen, are members of this program able to pull out at any time, even if their property isn't for sale, or they exit the contract after the 5 years only?
No, they can exit, and in the contract, I don't have it right in front of me, I can get one. It does say that they have to notify the town. Okay. So if they do pull out before the 5 years is expired, then yes, that all takes into consideration of the right of first refusal and paying back taxes. Okay,
thank you. So any other further questions, board members?
I have one.
Pat.
Since there are only 10 of these contracts left, would it be possible to get a list of where these locations are, just for our own knowledge? I'd like to just get an idea for where in the town they're located.
Absolutely.
Okay, great. That'd be awesome. Thank you.
Okay, if there aren't any further questions or comments, I'll open it up to the public. All right.
Elaine, do you see the comment from Ken?
Yes, I do. Just
Okay.
waiting for the rest of the time. All right. So there was one question from the public asking if there is a list of all the properties in the program. And as Pat just asked, Karen is able to provide a list of the properties in the program. And I'm assuming, Karen, that if the public wants to know that information, they can come to you to ask that?
Absolutely.
Okay. Thank you for asking that question. So Greg, in your memo, you're asking for us to reaffirm. Does that take the shape of a vote, or do you want a consensus of the board? What would you like?
I think a vote would be appropriate, please.
Okay. So would anyone like to make a motion to reaffirm the commitment to the Farm and Open Land Program?
Oh, all right.
Andy?
I move that the select board reaffirm commitment to the Farm and Open Land Program.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second. I
Thank you,
was
Pat.
almost there, Andy. I'm switching tabs on the computer back and forth between the teams and stuff. You had me beat by like half a second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Opposed? Okay. And next is an update on mold at the Essex Fire Department. Evan.
This is sort of tag team between Greg and I. Yes, we have discovered mold at the fire station. When they started removing some tanks up against a wall for their new air tank for putting air in their gear, there was black striations on the wall behind it. And sure enough, that area does have mold. And since they had the person there, they had the rest of the building reviewed. And they have found other areas where mold is present. So we are starting to look into a process for remediation of the mold at the fire station. And Greg has been a little bit more involved in the last week. So Greg, do you want to jump in?
Sure. Not too much to add beyond what's in the memo. I do want to point out, speaking to the fire chief today, the memo says that the mold does not pose an immediate health hazard. We're less certain of that. We do want to take care of it as soon as possible. Still trying to get a full assessment, but we do have concerns about health. So we're not sure to what extent, but we do want to take care of the mold as soon as possible. Beyond that, Sarah's here, but I am my understanding is that Passive is not likely to cover the cost of remediation. Passive being our insurance provider.
That is correct. That's Evan.
And apart from that, staff of the fire department, public works department, manager's office, and administration, we're looking to figure out where we can store equipment while remediation takes place. Trying to get a better cost estimate. We have kind of a plan of attack from the consultant who identified the mold. It's a two-phase process, just trying to get some more details as to what goes into what part goes into what process and how to best handle this. So more information to come, but I just wanted to keep you updated as to where we stand at the moment.
So this is Evan again. In talking with the chief, I think some of you may know that parts of this building date back to the 60s. It has been added on to, I believe, at least 2 more times, adding bays, and then the training room and kitchen as well. And so over the years, as the building got added on, new systems brought in, these are sort of the trials and tribulations. Part of our issue going forward is there is a lot of equipment in that building that is going to need to be moved, at least temporarily, to remediate some of the walls and some of the fixtures, and then once deemed appropriate, be brought back in while the station is operational or they are operating from parts of it. So we are trying to figure out the best way to start addressing that. So it's early days on this project.
Okay. Any questions or comments from the board?
May I speak?
Of course, Annie, go ahead.
Evan,
Yes.
there are also some board members that date back to the 60s.
Oh, sorry about that, Annie. It just
We all need a little work.
That's
Yes,
right.
we all need a little work.
That doesn't mean that you remember it. I
No,
date
I'm
back to the
joking
60s.
about the amount of work a building or a person might need. Born in the
Okay.
60s.
Thank you.
Good save, Evan. All right, we're going to give it a minute for the public. Okay, hearing no comments from the public, let's move on. We amended the agenda to talk about the warrants, which are on the consent agenda. Andy, would you like to introduce your question?
Yeah. So since we're not together in the room, I know this is actually Vince's job, right, to make sure we all sign those check warrants every week. Or not all of us, at least a quorum of us signs them. But since we're not going to be together, and rather than have them accumulate over the potential coming months, there's a potential solution that I know, Elaine, you sent me the COVID-19 FAQs from Vermont League and Cities and Towns that addresses this exact, I think, pretty close to this exact question. It says that you really can't have select board members just show up willy-nilly at the town offices and sign them outside of the auspices of a select board meeting or an open meeting. And what it recommends is that we anoint one of us to be the person to sign them for some specific period of time. So there's a specific language for a motion that's included in the FAQ, and it just says to appoint either one name or two names or however many names you want to approve whatever the document is that needs to be approved for a period of time, a specific period of time. So I would suggest that we appoint one of us to sign all of the check warrants through, say, the end of June or something like that, so that we don't all have to, or so that they don't just accumulate and end up potentially getting lost, or us having to all get together and have a marathon signing session, which is not much fun.
Right.
So, I don't know, people have thoughts on that.
Thanks, Andy. Annie?
Is it outrageous and not appropriate to suggest something such as Doc Hub? I know that when I buy a house or there's a lot of very sensitive documents that move through Doc Hub. Is that not a thing that's possible?
So I think that is possible. I'm going to ask Sarah if you're still listening. I think you emailed me late this afternoon with some input on this process. Are you still there?
I'm still here. I'm not sure I remember what I emailed you.
I'm sorry.
This is
Greg.
Greg. Sarah, I had passed on the email you sent me this morning. And your thoughts, your two primary thoughts were to just wait until the board's able to meet again in person, since it's not crucial to have the board members sign the check warrants. They've already been sent out when the board sees them. The second option was, sorry.
And they're approved, they're approved by a vote of the board.
True.
But
True.
Yep.
as Andy said, that would make for a marathon signing session at some point in the future. Was my second option some sort of e-signing?
Yeah.
I'm sorry, guys.
Yeah,
It's a long time
you
ago.
asked about electronic signing if that was possible, so we could look into that.
Yeah, we would have to look more into it. I don't think we have anything right now. I don't think the town owns any program right now, Annie, similar to the one that you were suggesting. But although I've used that when doing like banking and stuff, and always find it a little like, oh, it can't be this easy, but apparently it is. We'll just have to touch base with IT and see what it would take to get something like that.
So Sarah, what you're saying at the moment then is that we don't need to specially appoint a single board member to come in and sign the warrants. We're good to go because they're already approved, and you can use the minutes as the evidence of
Is
that?
now exiting.
What I was relaying to Greg earlier this morning was that we cut checks, sign them, and mail them every Friday. We have such a high volume of invoices that go through. It would be a real challenge to hold them all and wait for the 2 select board meetings each month. So the signing of the warrant does not hold up the process. So if it had to wait before they were signed, that wouldn't have a negative effect on the process. Additionally, what we do is we take the signed copy and we put it in a folder and we save it per our records retention schedule. I think that having the approved minutes from a meeting and attaching that to the warrant, or just having those things electronically for now at this point, would be sufficient, since the minutes are approved by the vote of the board through the consent agenda.
Mm-hmm.
I whatever the board's preference is, there's not going to be, there's finances down to one person in the office one day a week. If you were to appoint someone to come in and sign, yeah. I just brainstorming some ideas. I'm not sure that's imperative to have them physically signed right now, but
right.
We can look at other options.
Sarah, I think we want to err on whatever is the most efficient process that we can establish under these unique circumstances. So if it's okay with the board that we use the minutes as the evidence of approval of the warrants, that would be sufficient for me. Andy, does that sound like a process?
Yeah.
That you can...
Yeah, I agree that approving them as part of the consent agenda is adequate documentation that we have approved them, and we'll just have to go through all the signing at some point in the future, which is
even if they're just all lumped together in a file folder like the liquor licenses are, we could just whip through them someday in the future.
Yep. Okay.
And we can even, depending on how many there are, we can break them up over a few meetings. So
sure.
It wouldn't be all
True.
Okay. A few mini marathons.
Yeah, I'm just jumping harder on the bandwagon that I would prefer no one go anywhere at all for any. Yeah. Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you.
So now that we've pulled them out, I move approval of the check warrants.
I'd like to open it to the public.
Oh,
we
okay.
do it for each business item.
Yep.
Thank you. Okay, we haven't had any interaction from the public on that business item. So we can move on at this point. The only other business item we have on the agenda is an executive session.
No, so,
yes,
so can we I move approval of the check warrants.
My apologies. Yes, we did pull it out.
Yeah.
So we have a motion to approve the check warrants. Is there a second?
Second.
I'll second.
Okay. All those any further discussion? All those in favor of approving the check warrants, please say aye.
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 Opposed? Okay. So we are now on to the last business item, which is a potential executive session regarding the police department union contract. I propose that we table that for now and pick it up at the end of our joint meeting with the trustees who are patiently waiting for us to finish our business. Would that be all right with everyone?
Madam Chair, I think we also need to approve the minutes that were in the consent agenda.
Yes, well, we approved the check warrants first because we pulled them out of the consent agenda. So now that we've tackled the executive session being moved to the end,
Right.
now we'll go to the consent agenda.
Thank
Would
you.
anyone like to approve the consent agenda, which contains only one business item at the moment?
Somebody. I move approval of the consent agenda.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Opposed? Okay. We have a reading file and select board comments. Does anybody have any comments?
Unknown participant is now exiting.
Elaine, I just got confused for a second. It's not about the reading file.
Mhm.
I was a little confused. The reason I didn't help with the motion was because I got a little lost when we were deciding about the executive session. Were we supposed to vote on that, or were we just going to be okay with it?
I kind of
That's what I thought.
moved quickly through that. It's our general practice to push the executive session to the end of the meeting. And I recommended that we push it to the end of the meeting after the trustees and we finish our joint meeting.
And then, so we don't have to do anything about that recommendation. We just all breathe through it and go out the other side.
I think so.
I was just confused about the rules.
I'll try to be more clear and not rush so much next
No, you didn't rush. I just don't know anything.
time. No. All right. Unless there are comments or questions on the reading file or select board member comments, we'll move on. Okay. Let's pause for a moment while our trustee friends join us, and then we'll transition to the joint meeting. Usually there's a lot of shuffling around and people getting into chairs and stuff, so.
I can make a whole bunch of sounds.
We could all get up and turn around or something. Thank you, Andy.
Oops. All right, enough of that.
That was awesome.
I think they're here anyway, right?
So,
I do see a quorum of the fellow trustees here, yes.
It's
Andrew,
my.
would you run a roll call of your board members, please?
I would be happy to. So Andrew Brown, hi. Let's see, Dan Karen,
Dan Karen, hi.
Raj Chawla,
Good evening.
and Amber Tebow.
Present and accounted for.
And George Tyler will not be joining us tonight.
Okay. How about, Andrew, like we did last week, I'll do the beginning and you do the business items because the select board is technically hosting today. Does that sound good?
That sounds great. And
Okay.
so with that, I will call the Village of Essex Junction Board of Trustees to order.
And the select board will come back into order. Are there any agenda additions or changes to the joint agenda?
A question.
Annie?
Did Dan bring enough snacks for all of us this time?
Hey. Enough of that.
I have no changes, Greg.
I do not either.
Rock
Thank
and
you
roll.
all.
I'm just wondering about the decade.
I think we are all in the 60s, Raj. Maybe George isn't, but he's not here to defend himself, so we need to leave, let that be.
I made it with just days to spare.
I wouldn't say we're all in the 60s, right, Vince?
Oh.
Right, Mr. Brown.
And I know Amber's not in that boat as well.
That's true.
That's humbling. Okay, so next item on the agenda, since there are no agenda changes, is public to be heard, which is the time for the public in the audience to communicate with the boards on any items that are not on the agenda. We're going to sit quietly for a minute and wait and see if there are any audience members who have something to say that is not on the agenda. Hearing none, we will continue with the agenda, and Andrew, I'll let you take it from there. Unmute your mic, please.
That would be helpful. Thanks, Elaine. So with that, we will go ahead on to an update on the COVID-19 impacts, and I believe, Evan, you're going to lead this.
Yeah, that one's mine. I did a preview of this last week for the village board. They went first. In your packet is a couple of page memo of what we staff in the select board and village board have been up to during this crisis. First, the sad part of the report is the loss of life here in Essex. We have had several confirmed cases and loss of life as of the writing of this memo, which was April 1st, 2020. As you all know, the virus is devastating to those with compromised health factors, including but not limited to asthma, respiratory ailments, immune deficiencies, and more. It seems to hit the elderly much harder, and that is why the CDC and Vermont Health Department have sought to keep children away from the elderly. They have instituted social distancing and implored people to wash their hands. They say regularly. I think they mean really, really regularly, like on the hour if you can, if not more often. When this issue started really coming to the fore, and we saw it heading our way, we accelerated our planning process and started putting our plans in place. These are the key, I'm going to follow up on some key decisions that we felt we needed to make and in a hurry. We established the emergency operations plan. This is a plan that has been in place, has been approved over the years. It places the police chief as our designated emergency operations coordinator, and he was tasked by me to implement our plan. Chief Gary and the unified manager, myself, decided that the best way to address this emergency was to unify command in order to take swift action where necessary. Therefore, we asked the boards to declare the COVID-19 response an emergency. You both did that. We decided that in the best interest of the communities, the village and the town would act with one voice and would act as one as much as possible during this emergency. This included many areas of attention: how we would operate our buildings and grounds, what we would do with employment and staffing, the purchasing of supplies and sharing of supplies, and responding to issues, whatever they may be, as they arose. We also wanted to have a clear and consistent messaging from our joint communities, so we instituted having a public information officer be designated. That person was Greg Duggan, and is Greg Duggan. And Greg, for redundancy and keeping up with the websites and other documents, asked for Tammy Getchell to be the assistant public information officer. We then got the Emergency Operational Center up and running just in case it needed to be activated. That center is in the police department. Early decision and actions included developing and reviewing departmental continuity of operations plans. We wanted to make sure that no matter what happened, we would be able to work through our departments to respond to the needs of the community. We also very early on closed the senior center. We canceled all non-essential boards, commissions, and committee meetings, except for the trustees and the select board, which we are now doing electronically. We closed our public meeting spaces, and we identified essential personnel and functions, and a lot of our team are working remotely. One other thing we did was early on, we started designating how we would function in this new environment. And one of the key things we did is we started splitting up essential business and who could work remotely and how to deal with people on shifts. And basically what we did was split shifts so that if someone did get infected, the likelihood of taking out an entire department was less or lessened. So we did that. The other thing is we made a decision to continue to pay our employees. Again, they are in staggered shifts. They are still working. Some are working from home. Some are still coming into their positions. We are still doing water and sewer. We are still doing police. We still have paid on-call fire. So we are still doing a lot of our functions, but we are doing some of them remotely and some of them in person. We work directly with our staffs to develop plans. Our libraries were open for quite a bit of time. They are now closed, but they are doing programming online. So we pushed up the launch of the town's new website that is now effective. It is addressed www.essexvt.org. So www.essexvt.org. This was to allow us to do better communications between us and from the public. Some other things that occurred a couple weeks ago, the Champlain Valley Expo contacted me because they had been contacted by UVM Medical. They were seeking a COVID-19 test site to be able to do testing of the public. We agreed to allow them to do that. We felt that this was a public health good, and it also allowed that if any of our citizens in our community had to get tested, instead of them having to go to the hospital or to some other location, they could go to CVE. That has worked out very well for UVM Medical, and so that is still ongoing. We decided financially to not change out water meters, and we have suspended shutoffs of water services for the time being. Dog licensing was extended by the state. Property taxes were still due as of March 16th, and we kept town hall offices open to the public till after the 17th to be able to take those payments. So what's new to report? By the way, after this, I will certainly answer questions. The fire department, based upon the virus and our call response protocol, they are treating all calls as hazardous. Therefore, they will respond to the fire station first, obtain proper personnel protective equipment, as everybody now knows the symbol PPE, and then they will be going to calls. Our police have gone to split shifts. They are still working, but to make sure that an entire shift does not get infected, we split them up. We have recently just closed all of our park amenities, including playground structures, skate parks, tennis and pickleball courts, our pavilions, basketball courts, baseball fields, and the designated dog park. For the time being, the parks and paths are not closed, but we do implore our citizens to continue to use social distancing of themselves as they walk or bike through our parks and paths. The state's Human Services Department has identified the Champlain Valley Expo as its preferred location for an oversurge hospital facility for non-COVID-19 patients. As we speak, they have been preparing a 400-bed facility to be run by the National Guard. I want to repeat that. It's a 400-bed oversurge facility for non-COVID-19 patients. What they are trying to do in our hospital system is anybody who's COVID-19 a patient, let's say you have a broken arm or you have kidney stones or something that you do need hospitalization, they don't want you at the hospital. They'd rather have you there, and then they can have the hospitals treating COVID-19 patients. As well as that, our local hotels have been sought by different departments by the state to house recovering patients. Staff is reviewing options for our most vulnerable citizens in the area of food security, communicating with our senior population as to their needs, attempting to restock our supplies, and doing contingencies for staffing should the virus require the quarantining of staff members. The trustees have postponed their village annual meeting and community dinner, and we are looking for a suitable date within the new state law for Australian ballot and trying to work with the school district on that date. And as we are demonstrating tonight, our board meetings have gone to all electronic, including phone-in access. We have also created 2 expense accounts, one for the village and one for the town. We are documenting all of our expenses related to COVID-19, and we believe some, maybe not a lot, but some of our expenses will be FEMA reimbursable. I want to thank all of you who are here in attendance for the meeting for all of your guidance and suggestions. And I want to thank the department heads and specifically Chief Gary for all of his tireless efforts. There is not a time when I haven't called or texted where the chief didn't call me right back. We have had several long conversations about what to do and planning for what to do, and the camaraderie and the input from all has been spectacular and appreciated by me for sure. With that, I can take questions.
And Evan, equally, we thank you for what you've been doing and what all the staff have been doing.
I appreciate it. We have a long way to go.
We do.
Any questions?
May I speak?
Go ahead, Annie.
Evan, I'm just really grateful for all of the conversations we've had with you and me and Elaine and amongst ourselves. And you're so you've been so open to so many thoughts, and people are pushing at you from all sides. And I'm just really grateful for how hard you're working and how much you're hearing. And none of us signed up for this, and you really are in there making a lot of decisions. I also would like to commend, I happened to call Chief Gary for another reason, and he called me right back also. And so just Evan's getting back to me all the time. Elaine's like, I'm just so grateful for all the people so open to all the creative decisions that have to be made. And it's great. Thank you.
Oh, no. You're welcome. Thank you. Thanks for the kind words. Maybe for the people at home, I know these are tough times. We don't know when the stay-at-home order is going to be lifted. Maybe shocker, it's not going to be lifted April 15th. Not likely. But your local government is still here. We are, things just happen every day. We have people getting married who want marriage certificates. Unfortunately, we have people being deceased who need, and their families need death certificates. Our police are patrolling our 36 square miles. Our fire department is responding to calls. Our libraries are trying to push out programs. Our community development still has people who hope one day when this gets done to build a house or a building or get their business up and running. One other thing, so our businesses, our restaurants, most of them are open and they are open for takeout. So please visit them with 6 foot spacing, but they're open and we're going to get through this together.
Trustees, any comments, questions?
Select Board, any questions or comments? Evan, I have a question for you. I'm hearing on the news and through my work about enforcement of the stay home, stay safe order, and different communities are experiencing different levels of intensity in terms of what the police are doing. And I'm wondering if Chief Gary has expressed to you any particular intentions or plans or theory behind how the police department is addressing enforcement in Essex.
Great question. He did. We talked this afternoon. In general, we would like a light touch at first for enforcement. We do patrol. We do stop people from time to time that are either congregating and not observing social distancing. We have had a couple kids play in some of our playgrounds that we just recently closed, but signage hadn't been up yet. So we're looking to take a light approach at first. If it is egregious, if they are not following our instructions, they can be ticketed. We are not looking to arrest people. It is not a moneymaker. It is public health and safety. But in general, again, our first track is warning, having them disperse. And then if we have to be called back or we find them not listening to us or repeat offenders, we will ticket.
Evan, Annie, just a sec. I have one more follow-up question. Evan, I'm also hearing, not from Essex, but from other towns, that police are approaching businesses and saying, why are you open or why are you under construction? You're not essential. And where is your letter certifying that you're essential? I wanted to just let you know that there is no letter that a business gets. There's no certification. It's just the governor's order. So I'm wondering if any of our businesses, I wouldn't know if any of them have been deemed essential. There is guidance out there that allows certain businesses to continue operating. And are the police dealing with that kind of situation as well?
They are dealing with that. We have received calls, or during our patrols, we have found businesses open that may or may not, that should or should not be open. They have stopped in. They have been notified that they are to produce some documentation or something to us that is then going to the Attorney General's office as to why they were open and why they feel they should continue to be open. And so we will find out through that process. But we are, the Essex Police are not the enforcement agency for that.
Right.
Not
So
yet. Not
yeah,
yet.
I mean, that's a little concerning because the Attorney General's office is not providing certification either. The Agency of Commerce is simply asking businesses to follow the governor's order.
Yep.
And so there's guidance on the Commerce website, but it's determined by the businesses. They need to use their judgment.
No, I don't know. The chief said I could call him. He told me that the AG's office was working on it. So I could certainly, I don't know if he's listening or watching at home. I don't see him on the list. He said I had him on standby for the executive session.
Is now joining.
Who joined?
Elaine, I have something to contribute directly.
Just a quick second. Please mute your mic if you're not speaking. And Annie, I know you want to speak. And Pat, Annie had asked to speak first. So Annie, do you have something you want to say?
I feel like we should end the meeting because whatever that was is making me nervous, unless it was just a mistake of somebody's music in the background.
I'm sure it was.
This is Greg. I just muted that participant. It looks like they're leaving right now. If they try back and it's valid, hopefully we can have a better connection.
Good job, Greg. I did
Is
have
now
another
exiting.
question. I got nervous about that. So I had two
Okay.
different things happen. I got nervous about the,
Okay, so you had raised your hand a few minutes ago. Do you still have a question?
I have a comment.
Great, go for it.
Sorry for being confusing. Thank you, Elaine. Evan and Elaine and everybody, I just wanted you to know that I got a concerned text from a town resident earlier today that lives up by Sand Hill Park, that there are people walking past about 30 signs and using the swings and the playground. I know I've pushed before about taking some measures from the National Recreation Parks. I'm sorry, I can't think of the exact thing. So I'm just, I'm not pushing, I'm just restating that the concern was texted to me earlier today, and I just wanted to put it out there.
This is Raj. I'm going to echo that from my neighbors. We live along Pearl Street Park. The signs finally went up today. Nobody's paying any attention to them. I've talked about 6 or 7 sets of neighbors today, and they're all very concerned. Many of them elderly. They don't understand why people aren't paying attention. I think that one of the amenities in our park has become quite a draw from other communities, and we regularly have 8 to 12 cars and large groups of folks in the park, and I know my neighbors are pretty concerned. I've just basically encouraged them to call Essex Parks and Rec and express that concern and see what happens. But I think we need to ramp up the messaging a little bit. And I know everybody's working on 62 different directions at the same time. So having said that, I appreciate what everyone's doing so far and realize that everybody has a lot on their plate. And really it's not, it's more of a comment than a complaint. I did hear every single word Evan said on that report out of what's been happening for the past few weeks. So.
Evan, go ahead.
I hear you. I will talk with Chief Gary tomorrow about trying to get some patrols. Pardon?
I joined, Evan.
Hey, Rick.
Good afternoon.
I yield my time to Chief Gary.
Is there a question?
The comment was people and congregating in our parks, and that was one. And then second, businesses that are still operating even though they are not supposed to be or against the governor's order. Can you take the governor's order about how you're handling businesses open?
So as of, I think Friday, we got some directions from the commission, and we are supposed to be referring citizens to an online complaint center that the AG's office has. It's a link on a web page where they can report a business that they feel is in violation. The AG's office will then do an investigation or direct us to do an investigation, and then they will make a determination of what action they are or are not going to take.
Thanks for clarifying that, Chief. I had brought up a question about that to Evan before you joined, because up until now there had been, the Agency of Commerce was asking businesses to use their best judgment in terms of following the governor's order. And some businesses are deemed essential for.
Sorry, I didn't hear you, Elaine.
Oh, sorry. Some businesses have been deemed essential
Turn
for.
my video off here.
Some businesses.
Let me try to dial back.
Okay. Is that Evan that got out or Chief?
I think
I think the chief is going to try dialing back in, is because
Okay.
I don't think his video is working. I think it's
Yeah, I texted him remotely to say, take your video off and come back on just without video. So we'll see. Is he back in now? He's back in. Chief, you back
Give
in?
me just a second, please.
Okay.
As the chief works on that, Elaine,
Yeah.
now this may not be coming from the state, but I have received, like, for example, through my workplace, travel documentation from Department of Homeland Security, stating that I'm okay to be traveling the roads and that our workplace is to remain open. So there is some documentation out there. Obviously that won't apply to every business and certainly not to, I'm sure, stores, but there may be some reference to documentation that's out there that, I don't know, there may be some wires getting crossed as to, if people are saying there should be some documentation that they're looking at, maybe they're thinking of something coming from, like I said, the federal papers that I received, just as an example.
I appreciate knowing that, because we certainly aren't in that kind of contact with the Homeland Security that we are aware of documentation. So it's just confusing because businesses are being told to use their judgment. And sometimes it's not the entirety of the work they do, but there's a portion of the work they do that is considered essential. And so therefore they're allowed to stay open in limited ways. And then there's pushback because sometimes police are checking on them and they don't have documentation that says that they're allowed to continue.
Right. Yeah. So if there's, some instances where businesses like mine would have that, then, they may just be under the presumption that other businesses must have it.
Right.
I'm back on. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Sorry for the apparently bad internet connection. So I heard the tail end of a couple pieces there. So as I said, the AG's office has opened up a consumer complaint line where they want the police departments pointing consumers that are complaining about businesses still being open in violation of the orders. The AG's office will then review that business, and if they need further documentation, they will ask the local police departments to go work with the businesses to get that documentation, report back to the Attorney General's office for a final decision on that. I can tell you that we've already gotten several complaints about businesses in town, and some of them are exactly what you just said. It's businesses that may either produce pieces and parts that may have exemptions for government contracts or defense contracts. But we have definitely a couple that we got notified of on Friday that probably are pretty big questions, and quite a few people that are there. So we're following that procedure to refer it to the AG's office, and then they're going to be back in touch with us to let us know. As far as I think I heard the discussion on travel papers, there is no requirement at the moment to have any identification or permission to be traveling. We haven't reached to that point yet. So I know some businesses have issued papers saying that you are an employee that works for, but that's nothing that we're not checking papers. If police departments are not being directed to check papers if people are traveling at this point. Does that answer the question?
Definitely.
Okay. And was there a question about about the parks also?
I would like to, can I speak? Am I stepping over
Please
on
go
anybody's
ahead,
toes? Hi, Chief Gary.
Hi.
Thank you for all you're doing. With a great deal of trepidation, because I am not the person making these decisions, and I know how hard it is for everyone. My concern about the parks is not so much that there are the signs and people are going past them, because of course they should not. But if we wait until we see that before we put further prevention, that's possible spread. So every time one human hand is on a bar and then another person comes along, and like, for me, I would like to stay ahead of the spread and be ridiculous, but also I respect all of you who are making the decision. So I am shy of pushing harder than this polite tone and ask I'm saying, but I would really like for us to get ahead of it and not wait until people go past this. Like, anyway, that's my words, and I defer to all of you making these very difficult decisions. Thank you for hearing me.
This is Raj, and I'm just going to second Annie without going any further. I'm not sure what that has to do with what Chief Gary is doing. I'm just going to go a little bit further. I don't necessarily expect the police department to be patrolling our parks at this time. I mean, they have a lot going on, and they have worries that we're not conceiving of right now. So I just wonder if there's something more that, maybe parks can be doing, any GRP. That said, it's only been a few days since we had the decision, and I'm trying to give them time to make the changes they need to make.
Yeah. So I can give you a little bit of feedback on that. So the decision was made a few days ago, but the signs didn't arrive until today. And I don't know if that was before I joined the meeting, but so we have some signage up, but certainly things are not marked well. In my conversation with Allie from Parks and Rec, they ordered 200 signs that they were working, I think, this afternoon on getting those signs up around those areas. Now, I will tell you, we have people intentionally defying those. I can tell you that Harlan, one of the maintenance guys over at Maple Street Park, confronted some guys earlier today that what he described as college students who basically told him to stick it in his hat when he told them that they weren't supposed to be there. We were out on 2 different calls at the moment dealing with stuff, so we couldn't respond immediately. So we're kind of trying to balancing. What I would tell you is the officers have been told that the parks are going to be marked, that the amenities are closed, and in their rounds, they're supposed to be checking those parks. If they see violations, we're basically going with a couple of warnings, and if we have to issue a trespass notice, and then we were going to be issuing actual trespass violations. On Friday, part of the direction that came from the AG's office, we've got to get some clarification on it. Specifically, is talking about any violations of the governor's orders related to a crime must be referred to the AG's office. Typically, we would deal with the trespass with an actual citation, and we would refer them to the CJC, which is what we're going to try to do. But we've got people that are challenging staff people, and we've got staff people that aren't there all the time, right? They're home because we're trying to keep them home. So we don't have people in the parks all the time. So I think it's a balance of when those folks are there. I've told Harlan to give us a call. Don't confront people. Like today, he had some people that were giving him a hard time. I can tell you Sunday when I came in to spray the police department to get the buildings done, I drove by Maple Street Park. There was a kid that was in the park. I went over, met with him, got his name. We gave him a warning and said, you can't be here. If you're back here again, you're going to potentially get in trouble. So I think we're just ramping up. I told my officers, because this just happened last week, I told them over the weekend we had to wait until the signs came in so that they could then start, because going over there, and some of it's education on the front piece. Now, once the signs are there, it's clear that they're violating. They're walking around the signs or in the skate park, jumping over the locked fence to get in there. So we're going to make a more concerted effort. However, I can tell you we are very busy. We are dealing with lots of medical calls, lots of alcohol calls, lots of domestics. We, at gunpoint, took knives away from 2 people that were threatening people last week. We have a lot of stress that's going on in the community right now. And so our police response is getting cranked up. So, of course, we're having to balance those emergency calls with the park calls. So so we are very sensitive to the park, and the officers have been asked to do that. We're going to keep on them. But it is difficult to have the people there all the time, enforcing that.
Can I make a comment?
want to follow up with that real quick. Sorry, Dan, I'm sorry, were you going?
Yeah, I just wanted to follow up on that as well. But we're talking about the parks and recs and all this, public spaces. But are we including the schools? Because Founders or Essex Middle School or Fleming, all those schools have playgrounds, have areas where people basketball. I assume all is applicable to the schools as well. Evan, you can weigh in. Chief, you as well. I mean, I assume that's being posted as such.
We're not covering any private parks, which there are several in Essex. And to my knowledge, we're not, I don't know what the school has done. And we haven't been over near the schools. We've currently just been doing the public parks.
Seems like there's a lot of playgrounds that could be affected by that
Yep.
we really should be addressing. I mean, Summit Street and up in the town, in the village. So maybe that's something Evan or somebody might want to look at. I don't know, talk to the school board.
And Dan, I think that's a really good point. This is Raj again. I think, Chief Gary, I would say that I don't want this to become an enforcement action. Fully aware of the statistics on domestics right now going through the roof. You all have your hands full. I think there are things that Parks and Rec can do to mitigate access to some of these structures, and they've been doing it, and we just need to wait a few more days for it to happen. But like I said earlier, I've got 3 or 4 senior citizen families right along Pearl Street Park, just completely incensed at the 8 or 10 groups of that they're seeing go through there every afternoon. Today was the first day the signs were up, and they were all out, just staring at it like what's going on. And again, as I said earlier, I just suggested they call Essex Parks and Rec, but it's going to take some time for people to get the message. But unfortunately, I think that, like Annie said, every day that goes by, we've got this thing spreading more. And the thing that I'm so passionate about this, I keep bringing it up, Elaine and Andrew can attest to that. We have hundreds of medical professionals that are working in St. Albans and the UVM Medical Center and the various hospitals and doctors' offices around in our community. They're all putting themselves at risk on a daily basis to deal with this. For people to go out and congregate and to not take this seriously is a slap in the face to the folks that have to go out and deal with these patients every day and then come home to their families. I think people need to really take that seriously. My daughter's a nurse. Most of my friends' families, most of my friends' kids, their parents are medical professionals. I work with these people. People need to take this seriously. That's all I want to say. I got a little carried away. Sorry.
Annie.
I feel in my heart like Raj does, but hearing Chief Gary explain, on the one hand, I'm just picturing Harlan, the head of the Department of Maintenance at the rec department, that he's having that the police officers and that people are having physical interactions, right? I don't mean physical interactions, but just the fact that they have to be close enough to speak to one another, right? We're already that's a conflict of the whole game anyway. And then to imagine that Chief Gary is discussing the problems that are arising because people are staying home, and then we're closing the parks, and that's going to only exacerbate that. And it's just a lot, right? So we have to find our way as a community. We have to find our way to making the rules be what they are, keep the aggression back from how we feel about it, because right, if we start fighting, then it's going to take its toll on children in their homes. It's going to take its toll on domestics. So it's a mind game, isn't it? We have to find a nuance, and we have to figure it out together, because if we just close the parks and then we raise the other things, it's just as messy. And so really somehow we're going to have to try to keep people home with an open mind to a gamut of what they're going to choose. And that's all I'm going to say. I know that was a lot.
Can I go? Raj, were you talking about the disc golf at Pearl Street? Is that what you were referring to?
Trying to unmute. My computer's acting funny.
Okay.
I think the neighbors that when they stopped me when I was out walking my dog today were primarily talking about disc golf, but the the basketball court was full. You know, we've seen comments on Facebook about you know, the parks around town, the basketball courts being full of teenagers playing basketball. You know, even after the signs went up today. But that's, you know, that's just today. People are still getting used to it. They're still learning about this. So
I just looked back at the post that EJRP had put on Facebook, and I don't see anything about disc golf. So just a suggestion that if that is included as an amenity, that we should be saying that.
We should be saying it, and the disc golf starting tee for the first hole is adjacent to one of the signs they put up today, which I think was part of what was frustrating to my neighbors and to me. But again, you know, I'm trying to understand that the signs have only been up for maybe a half a day.
Yeah. No, I'm with you. I'm just reading that and saying, like, if I was somebody who was going to the park and I wanted to know what the definition of an amenity was, just so that I could stay within the rules, I would be looking there and seeing that disc golf is not listed and saying, okay, well, that's cool, I can do that then. So right. I think we need to incorporate that.
And I'm also acknowledging when I say this, just because for people that are listening, you know, it doesn't make sense when you have a family unit that is living together that wants to go and do something like that. I completely understand that, for instance, if me and my family want to go play at the, you know, basketball or disc golf, it doesn't make sense that we wouldn't be able to, right? I get that confusion and that dichotomy. But that's not really what we're seeing, at least in this situation. We're seeing, you know, just very large groups and clearly unrelated. And it is going to negatively impact the resources for getting out in fresh air, getting some exercise, and getting some sanity in all this. I understand it, but you know, we've got other people, like I said earlier, and I don't want to sound overly dramatic, but we have other people making major sacrifices. And I think they're our neighbors, and we have to respect that. And I hear from them too. I work with them, and I feel very strongly about it. We've got, you know, firefighters out there, we've got police officers out there. They have to show up no matter what, you know, and people need to take it seriously.
What this makes me wonder is, Chief Gary, I'm not sure if this is the best question for you or for Evan, if the parks are planning on a next step of potentially taking down the basketball hoops themselves, the few bolts that it takes to take down those hoops, as well as to take down the metal nets for the disc golf course, if that's at all planned yet.
I can address that. Yeah, that is our next step. First, we needed to get the signs up, see if it was going to be adhered to, but if not, that is exactly what we're going to need to do.
Again, I just want to say that that's my anxiety, is that if we wait until, but I don't know, I'm going to be quiet again. This is all very complex.
I'd like to speak.
Go ahead, Pat.
I absolutely hear what everyone is saying. Raj, especially, I sympathize. My sister is a radiation tech, and my best friend works up at UVM Med on one of the floors where they're treating COVID patients now. But I think it's also very important for us to know that, especially those of us who are online as often as we are, that the Facebook echo chamber is sometimes overblown. You know, someone who sees a group of kids playing basketball and then there are 80 comments on it doesn't mean that 80 people have all seen 80 different kids playing basketball. It means it might have been 5 kids in a family unit playing basketball, and that honestly is okay if they're all living in the same house. There are also instances of family units that are extremely diverse. You know, I know of a group of people who are 6 adults who all own one large house, and they all live in it with they are not related, but they have children. So they have almost 13, 14 people living in their house. So they may all go out as a group. Doesn't mean that they're not self-isolating necessarily. I think that it's okay for us to take a breath and pause, know that the signs went up today, give them 24 or 48 hours to work before we feel like we need to take, or take action, like getting to the basketball hoops to take them down right away. That may be what we have to do. It's clearly what Burlington had to do. But I do think that, and I've seen it quite a bit online recently, which is where I'm coming from, is that there's this sort of tendency to call out the individuals who are participating in this, or I've seen X number of kids playing in a park, or I've seen, my neighbors having a party and they clearly don't live together, or my neighbor had some relatives up from New York. I saw that they had New York plates, so they must have been visiting from New York. I mean, we don't know that. They could own a car that's a year old and has New York plates, and they didn't bother to get them traded out. I mean, we don't know what every other person's life situation is, and I would just caution us to make assumptions that all these people are maybe doing something wrong or are blatantly ignoring the advice that's out there, because we don't know that for sure. I think it's okay for all of us to just take that moment, take that breath, let the signs do what they're supposed to do before we're already planning on the next step. And I don't think that that's wrong of us to, to let the signs do their work.
I just want to say something to that. I agree with you, and I can certainly, I've certainly been on social media long enough to be able to recognize that, your example earlier. 2 more days will make it 1 full week since this was brought up. And we've all know how this has progressed in 1 week and how it's going to progress a week hence. So I would say I would make plans to move forward with further restrictions and then be able to pull back and not do them, as opposed to take Wednesday, decide, and then Friday or the following Monday and realizing this is a huge endeavor. The number of parks we have in our community, well over a dozen. So this is not something that I suggest lightly. But there are places where I think they can make Parks and Rec and EJRP can make some moves that would be strategic and smart. And I don't think dismantling 12 to 15 parks is something they ought to do. But I think that there are moves they can do to mitigate some of this. And yes, people who are family units are going to suffer from this, and that's a real shame. But the open spaces, the fields, the trails are still open, and there are still opportunities out there.
Evan, I wonder if we could ask you just briefly to let us know what your plans are and what the criteria are that you and Allie and Brad are discussing about moving forward with further restrictions. I think everyone would feel more comfortable if we could just get a brief understanding of what the next steps are and when they might happen, and then we can talk more about how to help the community.
Well, our first discussion was to get the signage up and get the order out. We also talked with the police about the ability to patrol the parks as part of their patrol of the community. We had originally talked about next steps being things like being able to take the hoops down, not the poles, but the actual cylinder of basketball hoops, making sure that the tennis nets and pickleball nets were down. Wasn't thinking about disc golf. We can discuss tomorrow about the removal of the nets. But please bear in mind that we've split our crews. So there's one person working in the village parks. There's one person working in the town parks on any given shift, and they're alternating. So Our goal was to get the signage up first, see what there. By the way, those gentlemen are also disinfecting our buildings as part of their hours. And then we would bring them back and assess where we are and start dealing with the removal of some of the equipment itself that can be removed and stored.
Thanks, Evan. I think it's definitely something we're all going to be paying attention to, but we'll hear from you when you have updates to share as to what the next steps are, I'm sure.
Sure.
Are we ready to move on to discussing how to assist residents and businesses during this crisis? Did you have specifics you wanted to share with us, Evan? Or was this an open discussion?
Mainly an open discussion. You know, we, and I'm going to start the discussion if you don't mind. We get a lot, as Raj has mentioned, we get a lot of social media. We have a lot of people asking us or telling us, you know, they've lost their jobs. They were already in tough straits. What, if anything, is the village or town doing apart from what others are doing? And so I did want to have some of that conversation and then start it with that the town does have a, I believe it's, we have a 1% of last year's budget that is set aside for health and human services grants. This particular go round, that's $148,000. This year we updated our process for doing that. And by the way, thank you, Andy, for being on that committee, as well as Tammy, Chief Gary, Wendy Hisco, are some of our, Brad Luck, are some of our members on a committee that took on this task. One of the things we wanted to do was we wanted to make sure we were getting our message out that this money was available in a grant to more agencies that provide services to our community. This year, we did receive more new first-time grant applications than we had last year. We did receive $186,000 worth of requests. So that would be about $38,000 more than we have funding for. But going back to our process, we identified 4 key items way back last year. I don't remember all of them off the top of my head, which would have been great. But one of them was food security. The other one was mental health and wellness. Andy, I'm sorry to put you on the spot. Do you remember, Chief, the other, I know that one of them was housing. And
Yeah,
I cannot.
Affordable housing.
Affordable housing. And the other one, I believe, was drug and family services of that nature. Those were the top 4, but that didn't mean we weren't not going to fund other things. So one of the things that I think we can do for our community, and we're already started for this, is normally those grants would get granted and approved by the select board in June. We would like to get that done in May and get that approval by the board and get funding sent out as soon as possible to those agencies that help mainly Essex citizens, but also other citizens that we interact with. So that's one thing that we know we can do.
Awesome. And I believe you had some outreach to the senior citizens that you're doing.
Yes, we thank you for reminding me. We have our own list of contacts for seniors. About 2.5, 3 weeks ago, when we were closing the senior center, we sent them a notice. We have decided to resend a letter updating them of what's going on. The senior centers continue to be closed. The senior van will be out of service at the moment, but numbers they could reach, people they could contact if they have questions, including village staff and town staff, to be a trusted source of information and to be very careful about scams. As soon as the government decided, rightfully so, to send money out, you are going to see scams. How you can get your money faster, sign up here, all that stuff. We wanted them to be very careful. They have been conditioned not to answer phones from people they don't recognize, but scammers are very good at disguising phone numbers. So we are in the process of sending out the second letter that we've sent to them. I know Village Parks and Rec and I discussed maybe creating some type of, I know we have a program called Essex Eats Out, which is a program for families who will eat at local churches and houses of worship. We're thinking of maybe doing a play on that phrase and maybe Essex Takes Out, where we try to get citizens to order food from our local restaurants on a given night or on a given set of nights, and maybe our local restaurants could do some promotions on those nights so that they are still in business when all of this is said and done. But other than that, we take suggestions. We've had discussions about trying to either do a food drive or maybe hosting a blood drive. We're open to suggestions, but up until now, we have just been frantic with just trying to get what we need to get done with keeping the government open. So we've gotten some of that under control and now looking outward as well.
Annie, did I see your hand up? You're good?
You did, but yeah, thanks.
Okay. Evan, I wonder if we could split this conversation into two pieces. One is things that we could do, suggestions we might have to help the community. And then I'd like to talk about the financial impact of this situation on our property tax revenue. So, board members, select board members, do any of you have any questions or comments or suggestions for Evan and staff about possible things that we can do to assist the community and businesses in the community? Annie?
Actually, this is the thing I was going to say, and I don't know if I don't know if Evan said this or I thought it while Evan was saying what he said, but my head was trying to figure out a way that I don't know. I think this is too hard. I think there's no way to manage this idea I have, or that you said, I don't know, where we could find families in need, and the Essex Eat Out idea would that you would purchase a meal from a restaurant for another family, or I was just trying to imagine, because it's so complicated, right? Right now, I know one of our seniors, several of our seniors are helping each other. And so then, you've got people going, you've got people in the population that were trying to keep at home, delivering food to each other. So I've been trying to help some of that, but there's just so many things. So I don't want to put a beast of a problem either, but I was just thinking, wow, wouldn't it be great if somebody could purchase, not only support the restaurant, but also get food to a family in need. And I don't know though what that spreadsheet would look like or who's running that show. But anyway.
Oh, go ahead, Raj.
No, Dan, go for it. Sorry.
No, to go further with what Annie was bringing up. Basically for seniors, my mom used to do this down in Montclair when I was a kid, did Meals on Wheels for senior citizens. And I hear what Annie's saying, but it's difficult to purchase a meal for a family because you don't know food allergies and what people will like and not like as far as food. But if there was some way to have people like the Meals on Wheels type program that state operates to put in requests for stuff so that it can be delivered to them, whatever. I don't know. I agree with Evan's idea as well. Working with the restaurants in the village and the town to see if we can set something up where they offer a special on a certain night. I know McGillicuddy's used to have Sunday night half-price burgers, but it's difficult. It's not an easy thing to work out. So that's it.
Actually,
Dan, just
Raj had a comment first. Raj, put your mic on.
Sorry, my trackpad. It's slightly different, so maybe Annie, if you are relating directly to this particular topic.
thank you. I just wanted to say I meant more like a gift card, Dan. I meant that like the way you do a Dunkin' Donuts pay it forward for the guy behind you or the car behind you. I meant like a gift card to Railroad in Maine or McGillicuddy's or anywhere.
Yeah, sure.
Thanks, Raj.
Sure, no, it's fine. We're dealing with this at work a bit at UVM at the medical school, and we have a lot of medical students that want to get out and start helping because they're sort of idled right now, some of them. So I thought with our new website, at least the Essex VT one, maybe there could be a very prominently linked page with resources for our community that would include everything from the United Way to how to file for unemployment to how businesses would contact for help, all of that, just sort of a dynamic clearinghouse that could be updated when it's possible. And we could start communicating that in conjunction with a reporter and in other ways, and just sort of try to make it a little bit easier for people to find the resources they need because they're all over the place. The United Way has done a great job of putting a very dynamic page together with what's available for people. The state has the volunteer call out, but it's a small thing, but it might make it slightly easier for people to get a jump off point for the information they're looking for. I know it's not a huge help for people, I suppose, but it's something.
So I have just a quick comment. There used to be something called an overseer of the poor in certain towns and townships. If we could, and they were responsible for kind of moving charitable donations around from one place to another and putting people in touch with like who they could help. If we could get like a committee or a board together that did that, maybe like, hey, this guy has X to donate. Like, how can that be distributed in community well? And that board or committee would sort of be like, okay, well, I know this family, and this family need X. We can get this donation over to these families. I don't know if maybe that's a possibility or if we can move that together to get something like that going, where we're getting like people that actually know what's going on. Like, hey, my family's hurting in this way. And so then they can go to people that they know in the community that might have those resources.
That's an interesting idea. Logistically, that sounds quite challenging, although there's a little bit of that happening online with Essex Mutual Aid. And I'm sure there's other groups that are popping into the Essex VT Facebook group to offer help. That would be an interesting but heavy lift. Annie?
He's also right, but that's the beast of it, the bear of it, because everything, right? Everything. The bad word virus, everything is moving fast and everything is changing every minute, right? You thought you were on time, but you're 10 hours late, everything. And so conceptually, right, that's what those groups are doing. That's what and Vince is also speaking to a thing that there are those people in a community that truly know, right? That really are the people who know. And there is, Vince, there is this kind of like thread of connectivity out amongst, at least in some areas, but how to tame that beast into something that works, I don't know, but I'm intrigued enough to try, right? There's a lot of us that can use online. There's a lot of us, so I'm just going to storm around on Vince's thoughts some more. Thanks.
If I can jump in here, I think one of the keys to Vince's thought as well is that it's not online. I mean, the one that exists now on Facebook is great for those who are on Facebook, But I think, as we all know, that doesn't include everybody. That doesn't include every Essex resident. In my own condo development, I can think of a good 24 or so residents who are not on Facebook, especially as we've tried to create our own internal group, and people who refuse to do that. But yeah, I know the condition of many of those people.
Evan.
Well, and that's also why when we do our human services grants, we are partnering with local entities that, and Vince, back into what you're saying is, unfortunately, there is no one entity, but we're dealing with many entities who have their own list, their own clients, their own people. Some are the same that go to a lot of them, but we currently are better suited giving our funds to people who then get those funds to the people that they know of. And that's the quickest way. Instead of us reinventing the wheel, and probably poorly to start, they already have a wheel. Right. And one other thing we could even discuss, and Sarah's listening in, is the select board has set aside the 1%. You can have a discussion as to whether you want to fund more than the 1%. That money would have to come out of surplus funds. We don't recommend a lot more than what was budgeted at this time, because we still have to work out what the impact, which is part 2 of this discussion, what the impact is going to be on our budget moving forward. But if the select board was of mind of wanting to put a little bit more money towards it this year, say 25,000, that could go a long way to helping these groups help the people in need of our community.
Evan, how soon do you think staff can come to the select board with the recommendations for awards?
Before I answer that, I'm going to see if Tammy is listening and is on the conversation, because I don't want to hear her screams all the way from her home. Oh, great. The lights went out. I didn't. The light. Hey, we save money. We save money in the town by having lights that are on. It's Tammy turning off the lights on me. We are going to shoot for either the first or second meeting in May.
Okay.
I believe we have a meeting just went out scheduled for. I get so many meeting requests. Actually, who else? Rick, do you remember? It's either this week or next week that the group is getting together. They have to go through all the applications. We have a scoring rubric that we're going to go through. So I'm guessing we're meeting next week.
That's great. The soonest you can get it to the select board, the better. And in the meantime, select board members, think about your comfort level with increasing the dollar amount of the pool of money that's available, and how we want to accomplish that. Because Evan's right, it's fastest and most efficient for us to just give money to organizations that already have processes on the ground.
Elaine, I don't think you're seeing my hand up.
Oh no, because you weren't speaking. Okay, there you are, Andy. Thank you.
Yeah, so Evan, thank you for suggesting potentially using some of the fund balance. I was going to bring that up, and if there's a meeting, I haven't been invited to it, so I'd like to participate. Oh. But the other thing I wanted to bring up, there's been discussion about personal protective gear and availability of it. So I've been working for my employer for 5 years now. I don't think I've ever mentioned my employer's name in a select board meeting, but I'm going to tonight because today an email came out saying that this is from Global Foundries. I work for Global Foundries. I don't think I've ever said that in a select board meeting, but an email came out saying that if you are in a Global Foundries employee and one of your loved ones is in a situation where they're being cared for by someone who needs personal protective equipment, you can apply for a I think it's like 20 N95 masks or 50 of some other kind of masks that will be provided by Global Foundries to the the organization that's helping caring for your loved one. And so I've already done that for my mother's at the Mansfield place over on Carmichael Street. And so I've ordered a set of masks for them because they were asking me if I had any way to get them for them. So I wanted to bring this up, and I want it to be on television here, that anybody who's a Global Foundries employee can ask that has some need, or has a loved one or a relative, or who's being cared for in a nursing home, in any kind of facility, any kind of situation where there's a need for personal protective gear. There's an email that came out today with a Google form in it. You can fill it out. It's very simple, and you can get that equipment. I want to make it clear that I can't get you that equipment. You need to ask for it yourself. But if anybody wants the link to the Google form where you can make that request, it's andy.watts@globalfoundries.com is my email address. Send me an email and I'll send you the link. I'd like to take advantage of that as much as we can. I think it's for all the Northeast locations of Global Foundries that these are being made available. I just wanted to get that word out.
That's a really valuable offer. Thank you for making us aware of it, Andy. Pat, you have been waiting to ask a question. Pat Murray?
Sorry, I pulled a Raj. No offense, Raj. I was wondering if there might be, or rather I should say, with the human services funds, if the select board did approve being able to use from the fund balance, could we kill two birds with one stone and help local businesses and also help with food insecurity by taking that money and then purchasing from a local business, like say on Fridays going to, I don't know, Vespa's off the top of my head, or Mark Barbecue, because I know that they've done a lot, and saying, here's $2,000. We would like you to be able to provide food and meals on this day for Essex residents. Is that something that you can do? Because it seems in that case, we would be both giving money to the business in the community, which we're trying to help with, and also would be using our human service funds to provide food directly to our community, which is, the whole point of the process. I just wasn't sure if, because those are private entities, if it would be able to work mechanically like that. But, it just seemed like that marriage might work to kind of accomplish two things we were talking about.
I like Patrick's idea, but the thing is, I want the funds to go to the people that need the food as opposed to people that just want it. I think it's honorable. I like the idea of it, but I don't know as if we're going to get the biggest bang for the buck per se by doing that, as opposed to, addressing the people who are really at need.
Is there anything we can kind of liaise with the state on this? If there's like people on like state assistance, that we can make sure that we're giving what is needed to the people that actually need it?
I don't know about at the state level, but what if we made it slightly more complicated and said, hey, business, make enough food. Here's $2,000, make food for the community, and everything you raise that night goes to Aunt Dot's.
Well, there's also the food shelf. The food shelf covers pretty much anybody, but it's not just our community. I know that's reaching outside of Essex, but... Well,
right. I mean, we could give that money to Aunt Dot's place, which feeds Essex residents, or it could go to the Chittenden County, it's got a new name, Vermont, I forget what it's called now, but Chittenden County Food Shelf.
Feeding Chittenden.
That's it.
Yeah, I mean, I appreciate the food shelves as well, but what that doesn't do is that doesn't give any money to the local businesses that we are hoping are going to, be able to survive the loss of income for 2 straight months of being closed.
I'm I'm going to throw a little thing in here on this topic. This is Raj. Sorry to just jump in, but you know, if we're looking a couple weeks down the road, maybe 3, I think people are already having a hard time getting basic supplies. So we're talking about restaurants, but I keep coming back to how do we help people get basic groceries and daily supplies?
Mm-hmm.
I have all the resources that I could possibly want, and I still can't get a Hannaford to go order going. I don't want to go to the store. I can't imagine not having the flexibility in my day that I have, not having a car, not having any of that. I think, is there a way? I don't have an answer. I'm asking this smart group. Is there something maybe besides restaurants that we can do to help people get access? Can we work with Hannaford's Price Chopper, Max, to figure out an access strategy, sort of the same as they have for seniors in the morning? You know, the health department has been doing a lot of emergency messaging around WIC recipients not being able to get access to the stuff they need right now, and that sort of brings me back to restaurants are great. We're going to support our local businesses, but I think people are starting to have a hard time just getting basic groceries and daily supplies, and especially if you've got any kind of barrier. So if there's anything we can do around that, and working with grocery stores or other suppliers to maybe make time. Maybe, you know, at Aunt Dot's place, they were recently closed for a period, right? Maybe there's a way that those Aunt Dot's clients can get a piece of paper that says they can shop from 8, you know, I don't know. I'm looking to this group to kind of brainstorm that a little bit, maybe not tonight, but.
Right. Can I make a suggestion? This is a fabulous idea that's developing here, and I'm wondering if this can go offline with interested board members and staff coordinating some kind of discussion about how we can go further and then bring it back to the boards.
Can I say something about that?
Of course, Andy. I'm sorry. I'm not seeing everybody when they wait.
Yeah, we have a committee that's going to review all this, and I'll certainly take all these comments if I'm invited to that discussion. I know that food shelves themselves are having the same question too. They're talking about, you know, the risks of handing out food and whether they're just spreading more, you know, more virus by doing that. And there are some food shelves that are talking going to strictly gift cards, you know, grocery store gift cards. And so, but that doesn't get to the how do you get to the grocery store question and all that, and it just puts a different group of people at risk. I understand all that. There's a lot of discussion about it. It's all complex, like Annie said a little while ago. But anyway, I just wanted to say that we have a committee that's going to be talking about this, and I think the discussion should go there.
And Andy, if you can bring back that one last thing, you know, we talked about if there's a neighborhood solution to this. In other words, if there are neighborhood champions to this, maybe bring that concept back to the group. I don't need to elaborate on what that means, but that's been bantered around in my circles too. Like, who are the neighborhood champions that can help people with that?
Yeah. Also, just so everyone knows, Aunt Dot's is back and up and running. They had a volunteer who had symptoms. Their test came back negative. They're going to open again tomorrow. So, at some point, I'd like to transition over to the finances side of this situation, and I would like to also have some opportunity for people from the public to contribute to this conversation, because there's a couple folks that are commenting. If everyone's okay with that, I'd like to open it up to the public, and then we'll transition to the finance side. Does anyone have any last minute questions?
I do.
Annie?
I have a comment. I think that maybe we should write down, or maybe, Andy, what is the meeting you're referring to, please?
Sorry, I had to unmute. There's the process for distributing the 1% fund that the select board is going to has a committee that's going to meet to discuss all the applications. We'll probably meet virtually, I'm sure, but yeah.
Thank you. I knew that. I got lost in my mind. I'm full of this. Thank you, Andy. My comment, I guess, then is that and maybe I'll just do this. I just feel like identifying, right? So there's people who normally have money and normally have jobs. Well, normally isn't the right way to say it. That had jobs and had money and were managing themselves here. And then without any understanding that it was going to happen, no jobs. And so those people don't even know how or where or when they don't know how to self-identify when they're the people that need to go get the canned goods from the pantry, right? So there are people that don't know when it's their turn to say, oh, I'm the person that can go get from the food shelf. Oh, I'm the person that can apply for WIC now. They don't even know that. And then you've got the people who are, so the gamut. And then how do you get the time slot at Hannaford to go if you have the car? How do you get into Hannaford? How do you go? And so the problem is so complicated that I wish that I could find a way to identify all the nuances of all the needs. And maybe I'll just work on my own spreadsheet. I'll be quiet now. Thank you.
Okay, I've got 2 people wanting to make comments from the public. So let's sit quietly and give them a chance to pop in, okay? So members of the public, if you would like to participate, now's the time. Okay, I've had a recommendation from one of the members of the public. So Ken Signorello has 2 comments he'd like me to share with all of you. I suggest that PPE, gloves, masks, and shields be purchased and made available to those that need it, like staff, checkout clerks at essential businesses, healthcare workers, volunteers delivering food and other essentials. Staff not doing their normal job can deliver these if necessary. The other comment is, I wonder if a property tax mitigation program should be considered. I worry that property tax payers, especially commercial, cannot pay property taxes due to lost income, may be inclined to make a distressed sale, especially if restoring income is not forthcoming. This might have a detrimental impact on the future grand list value. That will be part of our next conversation. Another comment, the United Way is coordinating lots of efforts to help people. From their website is a suggestion for folks seeking help to call 211, which is an excellent suggestion, and they are doing a boatload of work. And okay, those are the comments. So excellent. Thank you folks for hanging in there and being so patient while we get through this. Let's transition now to the anticipated financial impacts of this situation. And the reason I've been so anxious to get to that is because it's kind of keeping me up at night. I talked a little bit with Evan about and Greg about this. The projections for the state education fund the projection is that it's going to lose approximately $40 million between now and the beginning of fiscal year 21, which isn't until July. And then our next tax bill is due September 15th. So we have some potential serious issues coming up as a result of that. So Evan, I was wondering if we could start this conversation by asking you to remind all of us what our fund balance is. We all know that we have a fund balance, and this kind of situation is exactly what it's for. We have been saving money for a rainy day, and rainy day is not the right word for it. We have been saving money for a disaster like this. So can you talk to us about our fund balance, what it is, how much is in it, and what our authority is to spend it?
Sure, but first I'm going to turn over the numbers to Sarah, because we have fund balance. There's unrestricted and restricted fund balance. So right. I'm going to let Sarah tackle that first.
Thank you.
Sarah?
I'll just need a minute to access the financial statements. I don't have them in front of me, so just a moment, please.
I thought you memorized them.
No, I've been memorizing first grade math.
Oh, that's right, because now you're a teacher at home.
I'm a little worried our finance director's not able to do first grade math. I'm just saying. What are you trying to tell us?
Subtraction is subtraction.
Raj, if it's in a spreadsheet, she's an absolute wizard.
There's no such thing as carry the one anymore.
But if you're going to pick on my finance director, we're going to have a lot more social distancing. Well, let's go back to why we have surplus funds in the first place. again, we are a creature of the state. We collect taxes in arrears. We do things that are out of our control. Like we collect taxes for the school district. We have a policy that they are made whole. The village of Essex Junction is also made whole for the taxes that we collect. If there's a shortage, it is the town that goes after the shortage. For that, the town is able to charge a penalty and interest, and the town keeps that money. We make projections of what we think our revenues are going to be and what our expenditures are going to be. Some years, so think about this, out of 14 point, let's just call it, just for easy math, because that's what I need, a budget of $15 million. If you budget 99% accurate, you should come up with $150,000 surplus. But you got to get 1,000 to 2,000 things right to get there. So if you're 99% accurate, you're still going to have $150,000 surplus. If you are off by 1%, you will have a $150,000 deficit. In the last couple of years, we have been trying to fill police positions. We budget for those positions being there for a full year, but we have not had police in those positions for the full year. So we have ended up with surplus of funds. The reason why you do that is things sometimes don't always go your way. In 2008, early 2009, we had a severe credit crisis in the stock market and in other financial institutions, which sent property values tumbling and seizing up our economy. I believe, I wasn't here, but I believe the town would have used its surplus during that immediate financial crisis to make sure you had enough funds to make sure your police, your fire, and other activities continued to operate. And we will do the same during this crisis, which is mainly a medical crisis, as we all know, but it is now moving as well on several tracks to being a financial crisis and a humanitarian food and other things of trying to get basic necessities, because nobody was expecting the 2/3 of the economy to just stop going to work over a period of time. Things like making toilet paper, making paper towels, making hand sanitizer, bread, and other necessities. Sarah, are you ready?
Yes. So your
Great.
question.
I don't have to stall.
Your question was how much fund balance we have.
Yes.
So at the end of this past fiscal year in the general fund, we had about $2.2 million in unassigned fund balance. That's equal to 15% of the FY20 budget. 15% is the maximum unassigned fund balance per the select board's policy. And we chose that percentage per the recommendation of the Government Finance Officers Association. We also have $1.7 million in assigned, I'm rounding poorly, it's 1.753, so I guess that would round up. But an assigned fund balance, those are all items that have been assigned by the select board. The select board can reassign them as they see fit. So those are the funds that you really have to work with.
And Sarah, do the village trustees, they also have a fund balance for the village, is that correct?
That's correct. The villages are, you're gonna make me get that one up too. I forgot we were in a joint meeting.
You know what, the dollar amount is not so much important as the fact that we have a fund balance and a discussion about how it may come into play.
Yeah.
The village, I do want to say that the village's fund balance is, their policy is a voter approved cap of 10% of the next year's budget, and it was at I think like 9.5% this past year. So it is definitely a smaller dollar value.
Mm-hmm.
So it's
And-
so the village's budget is about three. Is it never mind. So you have a sum total of that, right, Sarah, somewhere that you could do. And as for Madam Chair, you're going to go into. So one of the things I want people to understand is we're in early days of this crisis. We saw the same thing about the school district funding having a shortfall. Some of the first questions one would ask is, well, how long is this going to go on? And we're still in the fourth quarter of this current year's budget. We haven't even started next year's budget, which is July 1. So a first question is, what's going to happen in the fourth quarter to this year's budget, and what's likely to happen in next year's budget? Just to frame some of that.
Yes, that's kind of where I was going. I know that we're in early days, but I would like us all at least to think about some of the hard questions we might have to answer down the road. And so knowing what our fund balance can allow us to do might answer some questions and alleviate some concerns on board members' parts and for the public who's listening. I kind of want to just make sure that residents are aware that there are steps that we can take to deal with the situation, that everyone's suddenly not going to get a massive tax increase on the town side. I have no idea what that means for the state with the ed fund. What are the things the town is going to do to address these potential shortfalls? Are we thinking about hiring freezes? Are we thinking about changes to the budget? What are some things that we are getting ready to do? I'm starting to see comments and get questions about, like, well, how are you going to get us through this without making our taxes go up? So I want to just start talking about those things that we might be able to start thinking about.
So I'll start. So we, from a staff standpoint, we look at these things, we study them, we try to look for trends. Things that are at our disposal is what we spend money on. We spend money on personnel, we spend money on health insurance, we spend money on our roads, bridges, sidewalks, buildings. We call that capital. We distribute funds. We collect taxes for the school district, for the village of Essex Junction, and we distribute those taxes. We invest our funds as well. We employ a lot of people, and we provide a lot of services. But the other interesting thing is we don't do it all in one day. We do it over 365 days, which also allows us to look at our cash flow and our cash availability, because not all of our money comes in at the same time either. And Sarah does a masterful job of making sure we have the right amount of money on hand to pay our bills that's coming in, to make payroll and other payouts to our contractors. And so a lot of what we're looking at now is, what is that cash flow? What do we likely think is going to occur to our taxes based upon what the state is going to do or not do? We have to talk to the school district about their funds and the village and their funds. But we are also looking at money saving measures. And what we want to do things in a very thoughtful, focused way. Some things actually save you money, or on the surface they look like they'll save you money, and actually they either have very little impact or they have a negative impact later, and you got to pay that piper later. Some things that have happened, I'll give you an example. A lot of times when you have a financial crisis, people want to work, so they give you great pricing to do work that you were going to do anyway. And so you're going to save 20 or 30% on a large ticket project. And you look at that and you go, they're qualified, they're able to do it. Should we spend the money now or not spend the money? But you're going to get a discount for the same work you got to do anyway. So you may want to, you'd start discussing things of that nature. But a lot of what we spend money on is capital. We spend over $1 million between the village and the town on capital funds. One of our concerns is that the state may be very likely to hold back its funding for paving of roads, which is one of the pots of money we use for that service. So we also need to find out a lot of where the state is going to be in some of those fundings. But we are looking at ways to limit our expenses moving forward. And you mentioned, because I have mentioned it, do we look at what are we doing about hiring? And we are very sensitive to the public that a lot of people are either furloughed or not working. And then we don't want to just fill positions in an environment where people are paying for us to be here.
Thank you, Evan. Does anybody else have any questions or comments on the select board? I have a few more, but I want to give other folks a chance. Annie's good. Okay.
I can speak, Pat, here just briefly about the school district. We are one of a few number of districts that have not already passed their district vote.
Yep.
Most of them do that in March voting, but I think, as most of us know, EWSD typically does theirs at the beginning of April, which has been pushed out. So our next board meeting is tomorrow. So we're hoping to get a better idea at what we're going to be looking at. As Elaine mentioned, the shortfall in the ed fund. It might present us with an opportunity to sort of revise the budget that we had originally published. It's not the intent for us to do that. Not really what we would like to do. Certainly not what I would like to do. But I think we have to take a look at all of our options, just given the climate that we're in. If that's something that can be done at the district level, we might help mitigate the tax bill for Essex taxpayers. But again, it's something that I'm going to know much more about after tomorrow night.
Yeah, that is just going to be a really interesting situation. You can't really describe it any better.
Yeah, we never have, as a community, have had much problem passing budget. Everyone's very supportive of excellent schools, but in this case, we're sort of living in a new world, and I think everyone realizes that.
Yeah. Any other select board members? Andrew, do you or any of the trustees have any other questions? I want to give everyone else a chance. I have a couple more questions, but I don't want to keep talking.
I do not, but I would open it up to the trustees if they have any other questions. Doesn't sound like there are.
Okay, I'm going to jump back in if that's okay. Evan, to follow up on a comment from the public that was made earlier, are there any things we can do at the property tax collection level, should it be needed in the future with residents who are struggling to pay their property tax bill as a result of this situation?
Well, I'm going to be very modest. I'm not a property tax expert. Property taxes are very difficult because we're only a small part of people's property taxes. I don't remember the exact percentage, but it is less than 20% of your property tax bill is municipal. Sorry, Pat. But the school districts, the big chunk, and the state is there too. So we're really only 20% of someone's tax bill at most. But there is a civil board of authority. There are a small list of reasons that you can either get taxes abated or penalties reduced or abated. Though that I think they meet late a few months from now. But there's a process that people can do that. They certainly can contest their, I think they can look at their value and see if their value is correct. But those are those things. So one of the things that drives our taxation is our service levels, police, fire, public works, the things we buy, the things that we do. So it's the money we raise for the service levels that people have asked for. Second, you have grand list growth. We have historically looked at 1% town, 1% as the growth. We are looking at 1% in that area to be achieved. And then the third is revenue, which at this particular moment, there aren't many opportunities for new revenue sources. So it's back to what we spend, growth of the grand list, which takes a while. It has to be, that's new buildings, new businesses of that nature, and then revenue, which in this environment, we're not looking to raise any fees. Any money you raise in fees or other things is money you don't have to raise in a property tax necessarily. So, and then third, one of the things that Sarah has been very good at, but she just started, is investing our money that we had in getting some interest. But until you have cash flow, you don't have money to sit and get better results that are not risky. So that's that.
Thanks, Evan. I guess it's something we just kind of have to sit and wait and see what's going to happen at the state level and take steps as needed.
Staff is going to model. We've already begun the process of modeling some financial impacts. I mean, it is early. When I say start the process, that means what we need to start looking at. What numbers do we want to use? What's the right, and I'm looking up at the ceiling. What's the right example? I mean, this, when was, I'm gonna be flippant in anything. When was the last pandemic? We don't have anything to say, oh yeah, this looks like it's going to be like this. One model is 2009, where you had the economic crisis and the credit market seized. You had a downturn in the property values. You had businesses suddenly going out of business because they couldn't get credit or that. You had a lot of unemployment that happened very quickly. That's probably a model that's going to be closest to what we would look at. And we want to see what people did in those times, how it worked, what was appropriate, and then give the board or boards a menu from which to act upon.
Pat, you made a comment. You'd like to speak?
Yeah, just a bit about the Board of Civil Authorities process. The Board of Civil Authority, now correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe is made up of the Justices of the Peace and the Select Board.
That's right.
So, having been to quite a few of those meetings, while the list of reasons for forgiving late taxes is relatively small, I do believe that provable financial hardship is amongst the list of reasons. I think that this would almost certainly qualify, certainly in my opinion, and we do rule as a board with votes as needed. I don't anticipate that anyone who sits on that board, if someone needed to come and, submitted a claim through us to say, it doesn't remove your tax bill, but it does remove the penalties associated with late payments on a tax bill, I would absolutely see the Board of Civil Authority for giving late payments in those aspects, for anything related to the pandemic. Again, I'm not an expert on it, but I've attended enough of the meetings to say that probably, or at least this instance, I think would qualify for that. And I see actually Sarah has a comment, so she might be able to speak more specifically to it.
Sarah, can you weigh in, please?
Yeah, so I just want you all to know, and for anyone that's listening, in anticipation of sending out our regularly scheduled delinquent tax notices, we had quite a bit of conversation internally about what, if anything, can we do about this? What can we, can the boards get together and make a decision about the 8%? Could we possibly hold off on the interest for 1 month, 2 months, 3 months? What would those different things look like? What would they cost? And who has the authority to do that? And so in talking about that, we just reached out to the attorney just briefly to say, hey, if we wanted to do this, could we do this? And he came back with, the town charter provides that these penalties and interests are going to be applied, and that's state law, and there's no exceptions to that. It cannot be modified by management or the select board. But the taxpayer's avenue for relief is through the BCA, like we're talking about. And then he also said that the Vermont General Assembly would need to amend the charter or otherwise enact remedial legislation to address the concern. I know things are changing. I'm sure they are they're very busy. I have no idea if that's even something we want to pursue. But what we did for the notices is we elaborated on the language that's in it that basically had previously just said, you're late. This is a notification that you're late. 8% penalty has been charged. Additional interest will be charged. And what we added in their language alerting people to their right to apply for abatement. We referenced the statute and, directed them where to find more information there. We directed them to the finance department if they wanted to make a payment plan. Internally, we were very careful. We don't make any promises or assertions about what the Board of Abatement will or won't do, because in my few years here, I think maybe I've seen them put a hold on additional interest once, and maybe one abatement. So I have no idea what will happen now, but I do think, Pat, you're right. Inability to pay is like criteria 3 on that short and very specific list. And so we've been, alerting people to their right to apply for abatement, and sharing with them how to do that.
Thanks, Sarah.
Can I ask a question?
Oh, please, yes.
So, Sarah, the fact that people don't have to file their state income taxes until July 15th, does that impact our ability to bill correctly because people may or may not have their prebate or rebate or whatever the worked out in time for the bills to go out?
You hit it right on the head. This is, one of the things that's been keeping me up at night. In the normal course of things, with the deadline for your homestead declaration and property tax adjustment claim being April 15th, we always have, probably 250 revised bills that go out for people who file late or, incorrectly and have to do it again. And that's with the normal deadline in April. With the deadline being extended to July and us having to set our tax rate at the beginning of August in order to get our bills out before August 15th, to make the statutory first due date of September 15th, I am anticipating that we're going to have a much higher number of people's tax bills go out without their property tax adjustment claim, which means their bill is going to be higher than it normally would be. And the first 50% of that is going to be due on September 15th, and subject to an 8% penalty if they're unable to pay at all. They will subsequently get a revised tax bill with the correct amount, but that won't be in time for the April 15th. Sorry, those are income taxes for the September 15th first payment. So I've tried to put that sort of on like the side burner until a few other things settle out, but we are definitely talking about that, thinking about it, and we're hoping to come up with some strategies of how do we get around that? What's the best way for us to just be reasonable? I know our charter says the first due date September 15th, but if that means half of our taxpayers have to overpay in September just so they can underpay in March, I mean, God, that seems a little bit nutty.
Sarah, are you aware of any conversation at VLCT about this in terms of talking to the legislature about making adjustments?
I was talking to, I'm not, no.
Okay.
And again, because it's in our charter, that I think it might be, different from other places in which like the select board can set the tax due dates.
Right.
I also don't know what remedial legislation is, and if that's like something easy that happens at the state level. I mean, there's more research to be done for sure. I have to, tell you, there's a lot of stuff on the to-do list, and that's definitely one of the things.
Yeah. Well, I wonder if we can't reach out also to our legislators from Essex and ask them if they know what's afoot and whether there's some kind of remedy, because that's ridiculous. I mean, those taxpayers are not going to be able to make that bill, and then they have that interest, and they make them go through the abatement process simply because we don't have something else in place. I'd like to be able to try to not make them go through that, but we might not be able to prevent it.
Yeah, and I think there had been Evan had reached out to one of our people, and they had come back and said, we're aware of it. It's definitely a hot topic. We're hound dogs.
Okay, good. Does anybody else have any questions or comments about any aspect of the agenda that we've discussed? And we haven't even gotten to the meeting schedule yet. Any further questions or comments regarding COVID-19? All right, let's move on to the meeting schedule. I'm not sure if that's Evan or Greg.
I can take that. This is Greg.
Oh.
So one thing the select board usually does at its organizational meeting each year is to set the meeting schedule for the coming year. Because of the coronavirus and because we had both boards here tonight, we figured we'd have that discussion now with both boards. As you'd know, we're doing all these meetings remotely for the time being. You just heard a lot about what staff is doing as far as coronavirus goes, and how we're trying to stay on top of things and stay busy there. So we do have a request for the next few months that the meeting schedule be adjusted between the two boards. Trying to meet proposing that we meet just twice a month. I guess 3 times this month, but it'll be starting with the select board or with the trustee meeting next Tuesday, the 14th. And what this will do is we can organize just one set of packets. It'll save a fair amount of time administratively between Tammy, myself, and other staff members who put materials into the packets each week. Just creating that stuff takes quite a bit of time. So we're asking your indulgence to consider meeting twice a month for through the end of June. It'd be a little bit different. The idea is that the one board would meet first, have about half hour, 45 minutes of their own business, then complete with joint business, and then finish up with the other board doing their own business, and then swapping the next meeting. So happy to answer questions about that if you're willing to consider it. After June for the select board, it would just go back to the normal schedule that we've been doing for the past year or so, with two board meetings a month, one of which was followed by a joint meeting, and then also attending a joint meeting at the after a trustee meeting. So that's the gist of it. There's the schedule that's in the packet that's been proposed, and like I said, happy to answer any questions about that and try to speak to logistics or anything else about adjusting the schedule for a few months.
Just looking at the schedule makes my head explode. So whatever you guys want to do is fine with me. Andy?
Yeah, I got a question. Right at the top of the list of dates, it says all meetings start at 6:30. Does that apply to the entire list or only the joint meeting list? Because 6:30 is really hard for me. What's the intent there? Are you saying 6:30 through the rest of the year?
No, that was sorry for the confusion there. That would be 6:30 just for the adjusted schedule for the next 3 months. After that, we'll go back to the normal select board meeting schedule of 7 o'clock starts.
$6:30 is hard for me. Tuesdays is also difficult. And I guess one question I would have is the 14th is 8 days from now. What are we going to have to talk about as a joint? I
would think for the coming few weeks at least, will probably be always some sort of update on the coronavirus and COVID information. Don't know if that's quite what we'll have, but we can probably by next week follow up with some more ideas about what we can do with the community to help with the community. So there'll be an update there at the very least.
I would add to that, I was going to save this for the board member comments, but at a future joint meeting, we need to discuss goals for the town manager. So we've completed the evaluation process, but we have not had a conversation about goals. I know we're well into 2020 already, but we should at least have that conversation. Any thoughts on the schedule, folks? There's choices here for us to make. I know it's getting very late, and I appreciate your patience.
I'll go ahead and I'll jump in there. I know I've been somebody who's been against only meeting twice. I've already just had previous joint meetings. I think we find ourselves though in some unusual territory, some very unusual times, and I'm certainly willing to give this a shot for 3 months, given that, frankly, our conversations that I have with Evan, with staff, are these conversations we're having tonight, and that's really where we're staying at this point. Is our staff don't have the time for additional work. They don't have time for new initiatives. So I think at this point in time, it makes sense.
I think option A is fine. Although if we could move the meetings to 7 to make sure that Andy can come with the start time for those 3 months. I mean, I just think that sounds like that would be easier rather than having him miss the first part of a meeting that just doesn't seem right.
This is Raj. I would echo that, and if we can make the nights once a month when the select board starts, I for one don't mind starting it later. So if the nights that the select board starts off for the next 3 months, you start at 7. Not my choice, but I'm just as a trustee, I don't mind going later in the evening to accommodate Andy's schedule. So the option with the next 3 months looks fine to me.
May I speak?
Oh, Annie, yes, please.
Normally, I'm in the same boat as Andy, but my schedule having been significantly changed, I can do earlier, but I am with Pat and Raj that we should accommodate what Andy can do, because it's no skin off my nose if we're meeting at 7 or not. So that's all I'm saying.
Greg, is that manageable if we move it to 7 for that option A?
Yeah, that works for staff. Just clarification. Do you want all meetings to start at 7, or do you want the meetings that start with the trustees to start at 6:30 at the normal time, and then when select board goes first to have those start at 7? I'm guessing the latter, but I just wanted to confirm.
I'd say for the trustees, we've been starting at 6:30 for as long as I've been on the board, and if we can keep it that way, it seems to work for everybody.
Yes, please.
Great, we can do that. Yeah.
Okay, so for clarification, when the village board meets first, 6:30, when the select board meets first, 7, but both of them joint.
Yes.
Yes.
Perfect. You
So it
can't
looks
see
like-
my thumb up. That's great.
It looks like we need to, both boards need to vote to approve the revised meeting schedule through June, and then the select board also needs to approve option A for all of 2021, through 2021. Is that
Can I make-
accurate? All right, so,
Can I make another comment?
oh, of course, Sandy.
And I don't want this to be taken as a criticism, but I found a lot of what was discussed tonight about COVID to be redundant to stuff we had covered in a previous meeting. So I don't want to have meetings just for the sake of having meetings if we're going to repeat things. And maybe it's okay if we just want to get the word out more and say the same things over and over again. But I'm just a little concerned that it's nice that we're having joint meetings and that we're being more concise, or we're being more, I don't know what the right word is here, taking up less staff time by having these joint meetings. But if we don't need to have a joint meeting, I don't think we should. I want to make sure that we have a clear purpose rather than I don't want to repeat things every week or every other week. If that's the.
I'm sure we'll do our best to try to make the agenda as efficient as possible, but I do also think we have a responsibility to be as thorough as we can regarding COVID-19 updates, because the public is watching too.
Mm-hmm.
So
yep.
Hopefully it won't be too repetitive. Any other comments from the select board? We can vote on the calendar. All right. Would anybody like to make a motion? All right. I'm happy. Oh, go ahead, Andy.
Yeah. It was actually Pat.
Oh, sorry.
I motion that the select board approve the revised meeting schedule through June 30th, 2020 with mentioned adjustments for 7 o'clock start times.
Is there a second?
I will second that motion.
Thank you. All those, any further discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Opposed? Okay.
And then I will also make the motion to for the select board to approve the option A meeting schedule for the remainder of the 2020-2021 fiscal year.
Or through April of 2021.
Sorry. Yes.
Yeah.
Apologies. April.
That's okay. Is there a second?
I will second that motion.
Thank you. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Aye. Opposed? Okay, we have a meeting schedule for the select board. Trustees' turn.
All right, trustees. Would someone like to make a motion?
I move
Donald
that
Trump at once.
trustees approve the revised meeting schedule through June 30th, 2020. Option A, trustees meetings would start at 6:30 and otherwise 7 p.m. when select board starts. Not sure all of that needed to be in there.
Good enough. I think the intent's there. Any further discussion on the motion? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Pass unanimously. Thank you.
Looks like we've reached the end of our joint agenda. Evan or Greg, is there anything else?
There were minutes on the joint agenda. Consent.
Oh, consent, absolutely. I jumped all the way to the end. Can't imagine why. Select Board, can I get a motion to approve the consent agenda of the minutes of March 24th?
I move approval of the consent agenda.
Is there a second?
Second.
I second.
Thank you. And all those, any further discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Thank you.
Trustees.
I'll make a motion to approve the consent agenda.
Second.
Thank you. Any further discussion on the motion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Thank you so much. Passed unanimously. Looks like that will bring us into reading file with board member comments. Does anybody want to talk?
I move we adjourn.
There's a motion to adjourn for the trustees. Is there a second?
Second.
There is a second. So motion on the table to adjourn the trustee meeting. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed?
Bye. Goodbye, select board. Good night.
Have a good night,
Trustees,
everybody.
thank you very much. Goodbye,
Thank you, everybody.
trustees.
Good
Have
night.
a good night, select board.
Select Board, please remain for another few minutes while we do an executive session. We're going to need to do motions, but Greg, could you please walk us through how we should do this executive session online?
I think we need to leave this meeting and join the other one, right?
Oh, I'm sorry. I was speaking with when I was muted. What Andy said, you're going to make the motions to go into executive session. And once you do that, you will leave this meeting. It'll stay open. It'll remain in place. You're going to go into a separate meeting we have set up for executive session, and we can have the discussion in there. And then come back into this meeting to close out.
Got it. Okay. So everyone needs to hang up and go back into the other meeting.
And I am frantically
Well-
looking for a power cord, so I'll be back with you in a minute.
So first we need to do the motions though, right?
Yes, we
Yeah,
do.
I move that we move into executive session.
It's got to be specific, more specific. It's
It does?
it's
Yeah,
clearly
To
written out.
address,
Yeah,
okay, you can do it.
I'll just do it.
Andy, go right ahead, please.
Okay, I move that the select board make the specific finding that premature general public knowledge of the town's position concerning ongoing contract negotiations and labor relations agreements with employees would place the town at a substantial disadvantage.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Aye. Opposed? Next motion, Andy?
I move that the select board enter into executive session to discuss contracts and labor relations agreements with employees pursuant to 1 VSA Section 313A1A and 1 VSA Section 313A1B to include the unified manager and deputy manager.
And Andy, we also have the police
And-
chief and the HR director.
And the chief of police and the HR director.
Second, please.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Okay, so at 10:12 p.m., we are going to switch over to the executive session.
See you soon.
Okay, I see Andy, I see Annie,
Woo!
Vince,
I'm
I see
lost on
Pat,
that.
I see Travis, I see Greg, I don't see Evan. But that's not, we can just adjourn it, or no, we have to do our motion
We did
first.
do the motion. I got it queued up
Right.
here if you want it.
I know. Go ahead, Andy.
I move that the select board authorize the unified manager to execute a contract with the Essex Police Employees Association for 2019 to 2022.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Opposed? All right, it's approved. Well done, Evan and Greg and Rick and Travis. Thank you so much.
And of course, he-
I had nothing to do with this. This was everyone else Evan mentioned. They deserve a large congratulations because they spent a lot of time and a lot of effort on it, and they definitely
Big deal. Yep.
deserve the praise they get.
Well, thank you so much.
Can
Unless
I add
there's,
one thing quick?
of course.
Chief Gary, do we want the motion to include the NEPBA as well, in addition to the Essex Police Employee Association? Does that make a difference?
Probably wouldn't be a bad idea because Susan is always concerned about those two units and who represents who.
Technically, it's a local association that has signed an affiliation agreement with the union, but we may want to be specific that we're agreeing to a contract with both of them.
Parties.
So shall we well, we've already voted on that motion, so do we need to make a second motion?
I think you can reconsider, right?
I would suggest you amend the motion, reconsideration
Okay, so-
to amend the motion.
I will take a motion to reconsider the previous motion.
I
I'm not
move
sure.
we
Yeah.
reconsider the previous motion.
There a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed? Okay, so now we're going to redo the motion, and Travis,
Yeah, what does
It's
it
the-
explicitly need to say?
I believe we should say the Essex Police Employee Association and the NEPBA. It's the New England Police Benevolence Association.
Okay, I'll try again. I move that the select board authorize the unified manager to execute a contract with the Essex Police Employees Association and the NEPBA for 2019 through 2022.
is there a second?
Second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Opposed? Okay, does that button it up, Travis?
I think so.
Okay,
Thank you. Sorry.
you're very welcome.
No,
Thanks for
it's good.
catching that for us. Okay, board member comments. Just a reminder of the comment I made earlier about a future joint meeting for the manager's future goals.
If people are
got it.
interested, the school board will be doing their meetings online tomorrow, much like we are. So if anyone wants to weigh in or listen in, please feel free to join because we usually have no attendees. So I think it might make it easier for people to get out and see something they don't normally, and this is going to be a pretty important meeting.
What time is it, Pat?
We start at 6:30 tomorrow.
Okay. Thank you. Any other board member comments? Who would like to make a motion to adjourn?
I make a motion that we adjourn.
Is there a second?
Second.
All right, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Thank you all very, very much.
Thank
Vince,
you.
welcome aboard.
Thank
Welcome,
you.
Vince.
Thank you, Vince.
Everyone have
Elaine,
a good
thank
night's
you
sleep.
for agreeing to be
Have a
chair.
good night, everyone.
Good night. Thank you all so much.
Thank you all. Have a good night.
Good night, everyone.